All right, fine. I'll do it. I'll be the quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 31 team in my preseason power rankings and a deep dive into the Arizona Cardinals. It has now been 10 NFL seasons, a full decade, since that 13-win Carson Palmer-led Cardinals team that was so fun, which means it's been a rough decade for Cardinals fans as they are now hoping things will be different this time around. A new coach, Mike LaFleur, coming in. Quarterback turnover, a lot to talk about in today's team preview for the Arizona Cardinals. Our first deep dive is off to a fantastic start. Thanks to you guys for the views. Over 30 minutes average view duration. And yes, it's a 3-hour long deep dive, but I don't think you guys realize how crazy that is to get on YouTube. So that's a huge thanks to you guys. Your passion for this series is incredible. And I do ask, if you are excited for today's video, if you love the deep dives, please do take a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy thing that really does show your support for my channel, for this series, helps push this video out to as many NFL sickos just like you guys, which over 30-minute average view duration. You guys are absolute sickos. So thank you. Very excited for today's deep dive on the Cardinals. And do not go anywhere, by the way, because we have another fantastic guest for this deep dive, Johnny Venerable from the PHNX Cardinals Podcast, the number one Cardinals podcast out there. I'm sure there's a lot of Cards fans watching this, excited to see Johnny make his debut on the channel here. A very insightful interview. I learned a lot about this team and what's going on with Jacoby Brissett and some of the decisions that have been made, for better or worse, within this organization. So you're not going to want to miss that one. And with that, let's begin. As always, we take a look at the offseason changes for every unit of the team, including the coaching staff. And we begin by discussing the changes with the coaching staff and also asking the question, not just with the coaching staff here, but as we go unit to unit, did this team get better, worse, or stayed the same at all these different spots? And the Cardinals are absolutely restacking the deck here as they say goodbye to Jonathan Gannon. They say goodbye to their offensive play caller, Drew Petzing, even their special teams coordinator, Jeff Rodgers, all out the door as they do what so many teams around the NFL are looking to do right now, and that is bring in the young ascending offensive mind from the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan tree. It was kind of a laughingstock at first when it was like Kevin O'Connell and Zach Taylor and Matt LaFleur, where it was like, did you know Sean McVay? Congrats, you get a head coaching job. But it's actually shown to have a very high hit rate as far as head coaching hires are concerned. I'd have to really track it, but it does feel about 2 out of every 3 of these hires that are just, hey, get the young, ascending, offensive-minded play caller type. Those tend to work around the league. Not every time, but from a process standpoint, you can really see why Mike LaFleur was desirable here for the Cardinals. And honestly, considering their ownership and this culture and an organization that just it seems like they can't get out of their own way, right? I'm sorry, Cardinals fans, if you don't want to hear it, but this is definitely one of the, man, I hate to say laughing stocks, but it is an organization that people look at and be like, man, their ownership kind of holds them back. And it really does feel that way when you break down all their decisions made, whether it's with coaching or different players or quarterback over the years. It's been a rough decade, like we mentioned. So for a team that I don't think was at the top of your most desirable head coaching destinations, to get a very reasonable head coach candidate in Mike LaFleur, the brother of Matt LaFleur, makes total sense, right? So it's impossible for me to say, yes, slam dunk hire, guaranteed upgrade. It's not like he's got major shoes to fill behind Jonathan Gannon there. I said to be determined as far as the big question of did the Cardinals get better with their coaching staff? I said to be determined with Mike LaFleur coming in. And that's really the main change. Nathaniel Hackett gets brought over from Green Bay. There's a lot of connective tissue here is Jonathan Gannon is going to Green Bay to be their defensive coordinator, and then Nathaniel Hackett, who was underneath Matt LaFleur recently in Green Bay and going back before he went to the Jets himself. It's actually a lot of connective tissue there with LaFleur and Hackett can grab a beer after practice and spend a lot of time probably rehashing old stories of their time with the Jets. And honestly, that's another thing here is like around the league, if you kind of just bet on the players and coaches that failed with the Jets, it's a pretty good track record of those guys just being better elsewhere. You got a couple of them here with Nathaniel Hackett and Mike LaFleur, and I'm not about to like really bang the drum for Nathaniel Hackett, but I do think in the case of Mike LaFleur, who did call plays back with a young Zach Wilson and a Jets organization that just wasn't in a good spot, you know, there's reasons to believe Mike LaFleur has really grown and is ready to be a good play caller here. So you're cautiously optimistic there. But then as far as the defensive side of things go, you're actually looking at a lot more continuity there. They retain Nick Rallis after kind of going shopping for some defensive coordinator options. They decide that what was left in-house was the best option for them. And I actually kind of agree. Like, this was not as deep of a defensive coordinator pool as a lot of previous seasons. And when the Cardinals were the last team to get their head coach, there weren't a lot of great options out there. Nick Rallis is very young and hasn't had a lot to work with here in Arizona, but you get some of that continuity, a very well-respected mind around the league. And they're gonna retain him. They're gonna promote him in sorts to be the primary defensive mind here, as Jonathan Gannon is obviously leaving. He was the prominent defensive mind in that building. And then a change in special teams coordinators as well, as Michael Gabriel is going to step in. So again, I said to be determined, or if you wanted to say hopefully upgraded. I think that's how we're looking at this coaching staff, with cautious optimism as the Cardinals turn the page to this new regime. Now, I want to really break this down as well from a scheme point of view, taking a look at both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Also talking about where I rank this coaching staff as we head into the year. You know, the rankings in this case are, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's kind of a starting point is the nature of this series. So you have an unproven commodity in Mike LaFleur, who did fail in his last time as a young offensive play caller with the Jets. That was, 4 years ago at this point, and just I can only imagine all the things he's learned the last 3 years with this new, resurgence with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. He's been right there after being right there with all of those guys under Kyle Shanahan and those famous coaching staffs back in Cleveland and Atlanta, and being with Kyle in San Francisco. So this dude has the definition of the resume that you are kind of looking for in this type of hire, right? And now is a great time as he, I think, just turned 40. He actually just turned 39. So, he was very young when the Jets went with him. That was 2021, 5 years ago. He was 34. So, yes, it happened, but, you could say the same thing about Clint Kubiak, who didn't do great in his first run as a play caller. So, lots of cautious optimism with him. But like I said, the rankings are kind of a starting point. They're going to come in a little bit lower, but not at the bottom of the league. C+ rankings across the board for their offensive coach rankings there, ranking 24th to 28th, both in terms of pass game coaching and run game coaching. And definitely putting the up arrow there on Mike LaFleur as well for all the reasons we've described. Now, from a schematic point of view, this is the Shanahan offense, right? And every one of these deep dives, or 2 out of 3 of these deep dives really, I kind of have to make the decision of how much time do I spend breaking down the Shanahan offense, because it's been so well covered over the last, more than 10 years at this point. So many of these teams run it and are aspiring to bring these schemes and systems to the table. And hell, the Cardinals ran it under, Drew Petzing, and they were very much a Shanahan-style offense. Petzing ran it under Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland and brought it here. So it's not really going to be too much of a change from a systematic, like, core structure point of view. You're going to be talking about that wide zone base, your play action shot plays, using that play action to improve your offensive line, get defensive lines moving east and west as they have to, they can't come off the ball and get north and south and fire off the ball against play action, because these systems make the run look like the pass. And you have to have your gap discipline and be prepared to defend outside zone, or you're going to get gashed against the run. So you marry the run and the pass, you make everything look the same, you get the D-line moving east and west instead of upfield pressuring your quarterback. And then ideally, you're also sucking in linebackers with play action and dropping these 15, 20-yard, really shots, big hitting, money plays, more often than not, over the middle of the field, crossing routes, posts. A lot of times you're going to break those off into corner routes and that type of stuff too. There's countless, route combinations and stuff you can play off of with these play action shot plays, but that's the core of the Shanahan offense, right? Wide zone, play action, you name it, and 12 personnel is becoming such a big part of this, and that's something that Mike LaFleur did under Sean McVay last year. They really were at the forefront of the not just 12, but 13 personnel revolution, where you're out there with 3 tight end packages, forcing defenses to come out in base, because if they don't, you'll run all over them. And then having athletes at tight end that can get down the field and do some really good stuff as receivers as much as they can as blockers. And they have the personnel here in Arizona, by the way, to do that with 3 tight ends that we're going to talk about here. So definitely expecting a continuation of what LaFleur did with the Rams last year with a lot of 13 personnel as well. And then you go to the defensive side of things, and obviously retaining Nick Rallis here. I do like Nick Rallis. Played against him in high school. I was a junior at Minnetonka. He was a senior, and he was phenomenal as a linebacker, but he has obviously climbed the ranks very quickly. Was named the defensive coordinator of this team in 2023 when he was 29 years old. So, has it always been perfect here in Arizona from a defensive coaching standpoint under Jonathan Gannon, of course, and then Rallis kind of being the protege there? No, it hasn't always been perfect, but my God, they have not had good rosters. In fact, in that first year, I can pretty definitively say they had the worst defensive roster, and it's gotten a little bit better. Some guys have developed here. They've had a lot of injuries, frankly, and they've still had, let's just say they were heading into this year with Gannon and this group. You would say they still have a lot of work to do on that side of the ball. But there's definitely, from just looking at Rallis, does he know ball? Is he a leader of men? Do players like him as a coach? I think the answer to that is yes. I think he is still learning a lot as a defensive coach, and this year as the prominent defensive mind, really in full control of this thing. It's a big opportunity for him. We'll see how it goes for him. This team is in for it, man. They ranked 31st for a reason. We're going to break this roster down. They got a long way to go. So hopefully things work out for Rallis. But yeah, for a young coach, it's he's going to have his hands full, man. So they do rank towards the bottom of the league for defensive coaching, just very unproven with Rallis at his age, with what he's accomplished to this point. I am a believer in him. He just does have a lot to prove. So they do also get C+ rankings across the board, and ranking in that very bottom tier there, both for pass defense coaching and run defense coaching. So it's 25th to 32nd for pass defense and 27th to 32nd for run defense, which, C+ grade, as you'll see kind of, I know we have audio listeners too. Shout out to those listening through the Fully Inflated Football podcast. But as you can see on the graphics throughout the series, a C+ is respectable for the most part, especially with defensive coaching. I don't know that there's really any bums calling defenses out there. Everybody's got a pretty solid baseline, at least. Some are better than others. And I would say you have a solid baseline here with Nick Rallis, even if the rankings are quite low. As far as the scheme is concerned, it's actually kind of difficult to pinpoint what the Cardinals' identity and scheme is. I would say their identity over the Nick Rallis and Jonathan Gannon era has been, just chaotic randomness, kind of the idea of throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks and just getting weird, especially in that first year. They've become a little bit more normalized as years have gone on. But this is a defense that's had to get very creative, whether it's disguising coverages. Especially when they've had like Garrett Williams in the slot there, like they'll take him from a slot position, like drop him into a cover 2 shell. Like they do a lot of that pre-snap, 2 shell disguise where you don't really know which types of zones you're going to drop into. They very much run a 3-4 style front where you're going to have those athletic edge rushers that can also drop into coverage, cause some of that confusion. Gannon, I think, was very underrated as a blitz designer, showing a lot of those amoeba fronts and blitzing defensive backs and just getting a lot of free rushers and creative blitz looks. And hopefully Rallis has learned a lot and can bring some of that to the table too. So what they have shown us is a defense that you don't really know where they're going to line up, what they're going to run. And when you look at their coverage splits, you might look at them ranking first in the amount of cover 4 that they ran last year, about 31% of the time, and say, wait, that's actually kind of predictable. And, like not varying their coverages on the back end. Well, most teams are running cover 3 about 30, 35, upwards of 40 to 50% of the time. So by being lower in the league for league average for cover 3 usage and being so high in cover 4, that is actually being unpredictable in that sense. And when you're showing a pre-snap cover 4 look and then mixing in, okay, we got 13% cover 2. They actually did go 0 blitz a decent amount of time, 12th in the league in 0 blitz percentage, a whole like north of 1% of cover 2 man. Like, okay, it's not very often, but most teams almost never run it. They would actually mix it in occasionally. They did run 16% cover 1, and then cover 6 is in there as well as your kind of cover 4 changeup. So a lot of different types of zones being mixed in here with a healthy dose of like aggressive 0 blitzes. This is, as far as modern defensive structures go, it's a very diverse scheme on the back end. Now, has that led to results for the Cardinals? The amount of injuries that they've had and the talent pool that they had to work with to begin with, it's been really tough. I think you could make a case that they've had moments of overachieving here with Rallis and Jonathan Gannon. They've had moments where they're very beatable on this side of the ball as well. And some of the kind of craziness that they try just leads to coverage busts and lack of discipline. It's really been a bit of a whirlwind here. So I think as far as bringing this all together, being more consistent as a defense, finding that true identity as a defense, or is chaotic randomness just your identity with Nick Rallis taking over here? We're going to learn a lot about what his vision for this defense is going to be. I would imagine a lot of inspiration from what they've already done is going to show up in what they do this year, but I'm excited to see how Nick Rallis can hold his own and if he can climb up in these rankings when we take a look at this series next year. So there's your Cardinals staff. I think it's a sound staff. I didn't spend too much time on Nathaniel Hackett because he's kind of just here as a cheerleader and a guy that's been a head coach that players do like, even if he's not the brightest like X's and O's guys. I really don't believe that, but I do think he brings a good energy to a building, a locker room, to meeting rooms. I get why they go with him to kind of, I don't want to say hold Mike LaFleur's hand, but as a guy that's been a head coach for, it wasn't very long. It was like 8 weeks in Denver. It was very poor. But he's been in charge of an offense. He's been a head coach. He's been around. So I have no problem with hiring Nate Hackett as long as he's not calling plays. So we didn't spend too much time on him. But, between LaFleur and Rallis, there's youth. There's a ton of potential. There's reasons to be excited. But it's very much to be determined. And we certainly can't come into the year and rank these guys all that high until we see it work for this Cardinals team. And I think that's more than fair. Now, before we get into the roster here and start with the quarterback room, I want to thank the sponsor for today's deep dive, and that is SeatGeek. This is one of the best times of the year for sports. Even though we're all NFL fans, we've got NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, baseball is about a quarter of the way through, and the summer months are here. Like, this is the time to go catch a ball game. If you want to go catch a hockey or basketball playoff game, SeatGeek has got you covered with the best app, with the best user interface, and the best prices. They make it easy to browse your seats. Just look for the green dots. You know you're getting the best bang for your buck. They're always market competitive prices. I'm always keeping an eye out for a good deal if I'm going to a Twins game or any concert or whatever it is that I want to go to. I keep my eyes open. I always find myself back at SeatGeek. You get your tickets right in the SeatGeek app. You don't have to jump through email chains and third-party vendors and have this stressful experience as you approach the gate. It's all right there in the SeatGeek app. SeatGeek has been a phenomenal partner to work with over the years. I'm super thankful for them and for sponsoring today's deep dive. So go get your tickets, show your support back to them. Use promo code TFG10 and you'll save up to $20 on your first purchase as well. So again, thank you to SeatGeek. You guys all go have a good time wherever it is you're headed. And let's get back to the deep dive here, where we are going to start taking a look at this roster and the quarterback room and their offseason changes here, which were large. They say goodbye to Kyler Murray, much expected there with kind of the burned bridge there. Fascinating point by our in our interview today with Johnny, where he brings up, like, this was a really bad year to need a quarterback, especially if you were the Cardinals, where you were the one team that could not retain Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was maybe the most desirable QB on the market this offseason. They part ways with him because of everything that was handled and mishandled behind the scenes with him, in my opinion. The idea of just cutting Kyler Murray and walking into this season where I really do not think the Cardinals are or were that far away if Kyler Murray could get back healthy and be the best version of himself with a new coaching staff. They end up paying him to play for the Vikings this year when they have a complete mess in that quarterback room. Now, I get it. They see a lack of upside long-term. They're playing for next year's quarterback draft class. Hopefully that all works out for them, of course. But it's just my opinion, man. Like, the way that this was handled, paying Kyler Murray in his prime, still in my opinion, to go play for the Minnesota Vikings, I think this is going to be one of those things that we look back on. It's like, how did they screw that one up? So for your offseason moves to be Gardner Minshew and Carson Beck, that I went on a lot of rants about just about a month ago with our draft analysis, we are going to continue to talk down on this draft pick and my expectations for him here. Gardner Minshew being a career backup type at this stage, that's a downgrade, and that should not be debatable. And man, as we open up the page here for this quarterback room, Jacoby Brissett might be a loss too. We still don't know as of this recording if he's going to play for the Cardinals this year, and this is especially where I don't want to repeat information when in the interview with Johnny, he does a brilliant job breaking down how this offseason has played out, where they started, and how they got here with Jacoby Brissett, where he's currently holding out. He wants, more money from Arizona, who struck out at seemingly every option that they wanted to go with instead of him at quarterback. And only time is going to tell if Jacoby is actually going to play for the Cardinals here this year. I still think it's likely that he is back here, but it's certainly not a guarantee. And that is, of course, one of the bigger wild cards for this team. If the starting quarterback that we're projecting here, that is, it's Jacoby Brissett. He is the definition of a bridge starter. I have a feeling that long after Jacoby Brissett is done playing football, we will make references to him with other bridge quarterbacks in this kind of cluster of QBs, where it's like, okay, if you got to go into a year with Jacoby Brissett as your starter, as you take a look forward at getting a higher end QB in the future, Jacoby Brissett is the definition, the archetype of a bridge quarterback. And that does land the Cardinals right now ranking 27th in overall quarterback for this series and around the league. But if he doesn't play here, you are definitively dead last. But I'm going to keep a relatively optimistic outlook on this, that they work things out with Jacoby, that he's in there by camp and he's going to be their starter. And as long as they want to go with him, I think he's a very solid player. We saw him step in and throw, really well in this offense that had no run game. They had no defensive support. And it was a lot of garbage time and just kind of, meaningless production, really. But the tape is still the tape, and you still see Jacoby hitting tight windows, attacking the middle of the field well, running this, the Drew Petzing offense, but it's going to be the similar kind of Shanahan-style offense where he's ran it around the league. In fact, when he was in Cleveland 1 year, I think it was 2022, whatever year that was, maybe 2023, he played like a top 20 quarterback for the course of the season. In a very similar style offense. Like, he can play on time. He's got a very strong arm. He's relatively accurate. I think there's some missed throws in there. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes with the ball. There's times, because he's not the most mobile guy, like, he will force some tighter window throws. He very much wants to beat you from the pocket, and if he sees a slight window of opportunity, he's going to press his luck at times and give wide receivers a chance to make plays, and that was something that Trey McBride and Michael Wilson certainly took advantage of last year. We saw just crazy high contested catch win rate by Michael Wilson that we did not see when he got to play with Kyler Murray, and there was a lot of debate there. Was Jacoby better than Kyler? That's a whole nother tangent, but an area where Jacoby was certainly better was just giving his receivers a chance in really meaningless football, right? Like, 3rd and 8, I'm gonna put it in the area. Go make a play, Michael Wilson. Go make a play, Trey McBride. Marvin Harrison was part of that as well, as he was battling through injuries. So we saw production from Jacoby Brissett, and he's gonna hang on that production to say, you should bring me back. I'm your best option. You should pay me a little bit more. And honestly, I think Jacoby's probably right about that, especially as they kind of looked to replace him and then struck out. Now they're back with him as the assumed starter here. And at that point, it kind of is what it is, right? We mentioned it. He's 27th ranked quarterback in the league, a definition of a bridge starter that can bridge you from one season to the next, keep the offense afloat, and survive for a year. Now, things get quite complicated here when we introduce Carson Beck, the 65th pick in this draft, the first pick in the 3rd round out of Miami by way of Georgia. Things get a little bit complicated here. And there's a lot of different directions you could start here with the Carson Beck pick. I'm on the record saying this was an egregious reach that made no sense for the Cardinals for where they are at this point in time. A 24-year-old, unathletic, low upside quarterback prospect that screams career backup. A best case scenario for Carson Beck is he is something like Jacoby Brissett. And some of that is in there where, like, he wants to beat you from the pocket. He will push tight window throws. He will give his receivers chances to make plays. But even coming out of Miami, there's a lot of blind faith that his receivers are going to make plays. He put the ball in harm's way in a lot of tough situations and got away with it for the most part at Miami, whether it was drop picks or receivers bailing him out. But he's not where Jacoby is at this point in time. Like I said, Jacoby, for the most part, is going to keep the ball out of harm's way with some head scratchers in there. If it's Carson Beck right now, I think that rate's probably double. And you're going to get a lot more interceptions from a Carson Beck. And Beck really doesn't have the arm strength of Jacoby Brissett either. That margin for error is even tighter. So can I look at this in more of a vacuum and say, all right, like, Jacoby may or may not be here. You just want someone that's quote unquote experienced. Beck's a rookie, but he had, 45 plus starts in college, went to the national championship at Miami. You want someone to just get through the year without the entire boat sinking. I understand where you arrive at Carson Beck as the quarterback, the late round quarterback that you want to kind of target here. Does it make any sense to spend the 65th pick in the draft on that guy? No, it's honestly just stupid to do that because you already do have Jacoby Brissett here. Yeah, he wants a little bit more money. Okay, just give him the $10 million or whatever. You get a better quarterback to play for you this year if that's the point. Because, guys, Carson Beck is not going to be the quarterback of the future in Arizona. He is the definition of a career backup type of prospect. If he becomes a starter in the league, I will eat my words. I will apologize. I will say I was dead wrong. But I feel very confident in saying that Carson Beck is just another guy as a backup quarterback that you do not need to draft that high. You also have Gardner Minshew here, by the way, who's another very similar type of projection for someone like Carson Beck. I don't get it. I do not get why they took such a valuable draft pick that could have been a starting corner for this team, could have been more D-line or O-line help, more depth at wide receiver, whatever you want to point to on this roster. You could have upgraded with a very valuable pick there, and in my opinion, they lit it on fire for a guy that you may or may not see this season, and I don't think it really freaking matters if you do. It reminds me of like Quinn Ewers playing at the end of the year for Miami last year. Like, that's what Beck is, but they just way overdrafted him. And no, I'm not really giving him much of a chance if we see him this year to shatter those expectations. I think we'd see a very week-to-week guy that, yeah, maybe makes some impressive reads and some good throws for a rookie at times and occasionally uses his legs to scramble for a first round. I don't think he's the worst quarterback prospect ever, but I think we have a very good idea of what Carson Beck was coming out and what he's going to be in the league, and I don't think the Cardinals have a very good idea of what that is and what they invested in him. So that's my projection for Beck. If they don't work things out with Jacoby Brissett, we might just see a year of Carson Beck. And I think it would be pretty ugly, honestly. Like, I think we would get a lot of interceptions. I think you would see a guy that lacks the traits to really do a whole lot here. And this would probably be the worst team in the league if Carson Beck starts. And then the most valuable thing you got out of him as the 65th pick is maybe you end up with the number 1 pick, an Arch Manning. And if that's really the master plan, I guess I do respect it. Do I think the Cardinals are that smart? I don't know. I don't know that I'm ready to give them that credit because I have a feeling Jacoby's probably going to be starting here for 8 to 12 weeks. And then it's more of a Carson Beck gets thrown in there late in the year, doesn't really show you much. And you're like, wait, why did we draft that guy that high again? That's the most likely outcome for me. But it's fascinating nonetheless. That's really all I have on this quarterback room. That, again, if you have Jacoby Brissett, it's a bridge situation. If it's Carson Beck, like, there's just not a whole lot to watch and get excited about here, in my opinion, if you're a Cardinals fan. At least Jacoby can get these playmakers the ball down the field, has experience running this offense, and has shown to have, high-end games at the NFL level before. And for that reason, I think you do give Jacoby $14 million for the year. Like, sure, why not? And as we turn the page to running back here, like, you already drafted Jeremiah Love with the 3rd pick in the draft. A big part of that is we got to put butts in the seats and be entertaining this year. You've already committed in many ways to that idea. You might as well back that up with more reasonable quarterback play. So we'll see how that all plays out. We could get a week from now and none of that even matters and Jacoby's back. So we'll see how that all plays out. But as we look at the running back room next and look at their offseason changes here, this is one of the most upgraded rooms in the entire league. Massively upgraded at running back for the Cardinals here. The only loss here is Amari DiMercato, who I think heads to the Chiefs. But the additions are awesome, man. Jeremiah Love with the number 3 pick in the draft. Obvious reasons to get excited about him. They signed Tyler Algier at the top of free agency there. Very good backup running back. One of the best backups, if not the best true backup backs in the league. They bring James Conner back, who missed most of last season with an injury, obviously getting up there in age, but you have to account for him coming back. And then even Trey Benson, who missed out on his opportunity when Conner got hurt because Trey Benson got hurt last year. So you basically have a whole new running back room after it was easily one of the worst, if not the worst in the league last year. And now, as I rank this group heading into the year, I've already got them roughly top 8 in a cluster of very good running back rooms in the NFL that ranks 8th to 13th. And obviously, like Jeremiah Love being the number 3 pick in the draft, with all of the things we've talked about with him in the draft process, coming pretty fresh off the draft here, like very much a well-documented player here, you're hoping he can become the best running back in the NFL. And it's not crazy to hope that. He's got good size, 6 foot, 214 pounds, but rare athletic, just elusiveness and agility and overall athletic ability and speed for a guy that is full-sized. Like, I think a lot of people will point to the 4.37 speed or whatever it was Jeremiah Love ran and some of the breakaway runs at Notre Dame, and that's awesome. Like, that is pretty normal for the best backs in the league. Is like, that's kind of the cherry on top that makes you a true difference maker, a true elite all-pro type of talent, is that you can do all of the other stuff, and once you get 20 yards down the field, clear through the second level, oftentimes after making a guy miss, then yeah, you're not going to get caught from behind. You're going to have those grand slam runs that change football games. He has that, but the reality is you only get to see those plays, if you're lucky, 3 to 5 times in a season. It's great that it's in there. That speed really shows up on like outside zone and in the receiving game, where he's able to kind of pull away from guys, break angles. That's more of where the speed comes into play. But really with Jeremiah Love, it's the shiftiness, the vision, the rare elusiveness and ability to make guys miss that he has for more of a full-size back that does have some bit of a power profile to run through arm tackles, to fight for tough yards. He's not super powerful. He's not. I don't think he's going to be up there with the best power runners in the league, but he's got enough paired with the rare athletic ability that he has to say, yeah, this guy could become the best running back in the NFL. Now, a big part of that with any running back is putting the right offensive line in front of him to set the floor of your run game so that you can get to that point. Look at Ashton Ginty last year, dropped into a really bad offensive line and wasn't the best rookie season, I'll say that. Not really to any fault of Ashton Ginty, in my opinion, but, you know, we haven't looked at the offensive line yet. There's some fear that this team maybe wasn't ready to draft a running back with the number 3 pick in the draft. We're going to have to see how that all plays out, but the talent itself here to come in as a rookie and get this Cardinals running back room ranking, you know, up towards the top third of the league here coming in, speaks to how highly perceived he is as a prospect coming in. And then you have all of this depth. Like, this is the deepest running back room in the league, so much so that I would not be surprised if teams are calling about Trey Benson or maybe even Tyler Algier, who I think would be totally willing to go somewhere else, having thought that he was going to get more of a, you know, lead share of this backfield when he signed here back in the start of free agency. So we'll keep an eye on him, maybe a trade here, because there's not really a reason to have 4 running backs like this. But they do currently. And Tyler Algier definitely, with his durability, being in his prime, with the role he played in Atlanta, how consistent he was as that smashing thunder complementary back, he is what you see is what you get with this guy. And they got a really good value on him. So I don't have too much to add on Tyler Algier. We definitely know what he is, but he's going to steal some touchdowns. He's going to, if you ever get a lead in Arizona, he's going to be someone that can really churn out tough yardage. He's a great complement to Jeremiah Love in that sense, where I do think Tyler Algier has a little bit more of a power profile. If it's 3rd and 2 and I just need a well-blocked run and a little bit of extra power to fight through to move the chains, I think Tyler Algier can give you that. So he's a really nice backup, as we've seen for years. James Conner, I really hope he's healthy and gets opportunities and reminds us of the old James Conner, because he's been one of my favorite players to watch. I've in previous years' deep dives really defended him as one of the underrated players in the NFL. Honestly, he's been a missed tackle forced, contact balance machine. He's an incredible receiving back because he blocks. He's got great hands, super reliable timing as a check down guy who's difficult to get to the ground. And just some of the best vision in the league, rare toughness and strength. Like, there's so much to wax poetic about with James Conner in his prime, but a big injury last year, gets a very cheap reworked deal to come back. And at this point, I probably look at him as more of a third down role, most likely, is how I would see this, where, you know, Jeremiah Love may or may not be in the backfield. He's an okay pass blocker with room to improve. And Tyler Algier can pass block too, but you know, James Conner in that role with really good pass blocking, really good hands and instincts in that sense. I think if he's sticking around here and you want to roll for him, it's probably as a third down kind of Samaje Perine type of back here. And then Trey Benson's hanging out. And I still think Trey Benson has talent and upside. We've just kind of collectively written him off at this point now that Jeremiah Love has been picked here. And honestly, that's fair if he stays here. But there's really no reason not to trade him at this point. He's never going to see the ball here. You could probably still get a 6th round pick for him, which why not? I mean, he, to me, had a disappointing rookie season with some vision questions, but showed some of the upside. And then year 2 happens. I thought Trey Benson looked good last year. James Conner goes down, and within like a week, Trey Benson also goes down for this season. And if I'm looking for a backup running back, I would make a call about Trey Benson. So I'm still intrigued by his height, weight, speed. Still young, still has developmental upside to be a guy. Will it happen? I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of interesting backup running backs in the league that don't get moved more often than they maybe should. So we'll see about that. And then, man, talking about anybody after that feels kind of pointless. But Bam Knight has played and has been a very adequate backup type. And Corey Kiner was an interesting kind of contact balance back coming out of college. So they have a very, very deep, if not the deepest running back room in the league. And with the up arrow on Jeremiah Love, have a chance for this to be one of the definitive strengths of this team. It's running back, right? Like, we talk about this as a position that has a hard time really elevating teams, and it's one of the least paid positions in the league for that reason. Jeremiah Love, in fact, as the number 3 overall pick, already has the most guaranteed money of any running back in the league. So it's nice to have a running back room this good, but when this is kind of your definitive strength, or what you're hoping will be your definitive strength, it's just not a great starting point. But it's exciting, and kind of like we've talked about with them taking Jeremiah Love, it should put some butts in the seats, and you're hoping Love's going to be a hell of a lot of fun to watch if you're a Cardinals fan, to at least help you get you through this season. But let's turn the page and talk about the weaponry here, which is another bright spot on this team, to be fair. So much so that they really didn't do much at wide receiver or tight end this offseason. Some minor changes at wide receiver. They say goodbye to, a pair of their rotational guys in Greg Dortch and Zay Jones. They bring in Kendrick Bourne, who had a good start to last year in San Francisco. They draft Reggie Virgil, kind of an outside vertical threat in the 5th round. And they bring in Devin Duvernay, who's more of a contribution as a returner for this team, mostly to replace Greg Dortch there. But just saying neutral at wide receiver. You could put Marvin Harrison. I always put guys coming back from injury. He played through the appendicitis, and my cutoff is 50% of games played. I won't put you as an addition. But you could certainly, and I will certainly bring that up to say Marvin getting back healthy is a reason to say this wide receiver room could or should even be looked at as upgraded. But I've got cutoffs there, and maybe I'm stubborn, but that's why he doesn't show up as an addition there. But you certainly can mention it. And then at tight end, one of those guys eligible to be noted as an addition to the team is Tip Raymond, 3rd round pick in 2024, the definition of your modern big-bodied tight end that a lot of people do just kind of forget exists here in Arizona because the second year was such a lost season with, I think it was a foot or an ankle, but fully expecting him back here. And for a team that's going to run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, it's a solid to even big addition for this team that I'm excited about. And then they also signed Tegan Quatoriano there. So I said slightly upgraded at tight end with really the return of Tip Raymond. But like I said, this is another relative bright spot on this Cardinals team in terms of weaponry. This is actually my highest ranked position group for the Cardinals, ranking 8th to 11th. And of course, Jeremiah Love is a part of that as well as a pass catcher here, where we can continue to discuss his capabilities. But yeah, I do look at this group as a foundational piece of this team, hopefully, if everything goes right, especially talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. there. And let's just start there. Obviously, has been a disappointing start to his career. I don't think it's been as bad as you tend to see out there. A lot of people look at him and say this was just a miss by the Cardinals, that he was overhyped and, it wasn't worth it in that draft, and that's kind of where the narrative is at on Marvin Harrison. You got a lot of people kind of selling Marvin Harrison, but even though I say that, I haven't really met anybody that's selling on Marvin Harrison Jr. And Cardinals fans, I absolutely want to hear from you guys in the comments how you feel personally about Marvin this year and how confident are you in his abilities. And I will say, getting Jacoby back, a big reason I would want to do that as the Cardinals is this is such a big year for Marvin Harrison Jr., and he got in his head a little bit last year. I don't want to force him to deal with the Carson Beck experience. I don't. Let's get Jacoby in there for Marv's sake. That's a huge, if I'm Jacoby trying to come back and get that money, that's what I'm going to the Cardinals to say. Like, dude, that should be the reason you pay me, and that would make a ton of sense for me. Do the Cardinals always make sense with their decisions in that sense? Not really. But anyway, it just hasn't all gotten there with Marv. It, to me, has felt like we've been so close to getting that exciting version of Marvin Harrison, though, and it just feels like you're right on the cusp of still seeing what was the highest graded wide receiver prospect I've ever seen. Such a no-brainer pick with the 4th pick in the draft where they took him. The son of Marvin Harrison. What he was at Ohio State was a generational wide receiver prospect, in my opinion. And hindsight has led us to get away from remembering him that way. And when you look at his rookie season, for me, there were so many of those almost completions with him where it was red zone fades where the ball's going through his hands or Kyler was just missing him, or like they were in the first year together there in Marv's rookie season. It was like a lot of chemistry balls, whether it was back shoulders or fades or timing throws down the field where it's like, they're right there. They're so close. And then last year happened, man. And there was just a lot going on here, whether it was with Marv or with the quarterbacks. I do think in the first month of the year, that was the first time Marvin really genuinely struggled. And Kyler was out there, and this is where it's all this kind of perfect shitstorm because Kyler got so much hate for the fact that they were able to throw the ball when Jacoby stepped in. And in reality, it's like, number one, they were throwing the ball on a high volume level because when Kyler's legs were taken out of the picture, they had no run game at all, and their top 2 running backs got hurt. So, yeah, they threw the ball a lot more. And Jacoby is a guy that's just kind of like going to drop back and put the ball on you and give these guys a chance. So there was some of that. But the reality is, if you watch the tape from the first month of this season, Kyler was Kyler. Marvin Harrison completely let him down. 3 drops in the first month of the season, just not the reliable number 1 wide receiver you were hoping he was going to be. And then Kyler ends up getting hurt, which brings in Jacoby Brissett. Marv then starts to play better, like he snaps out of it. He just started making catches that he wasn't making for Kyler. there's not a whole lot on the film to give you a great reason why that was. He just started to play better and honestly was starting to trend back in the right direction, give you reasons to get excited about him, and then he gets appendicitis and he has to miss about a month, and then coming back from that, dude, like that's a pretty serious surgery, having to deal with that pain. Like the season just completely got away from Marvin Harrison Jr. and really turned into a lost year, a lost second season for him. So that's where we're at in his timeline. Like it does feel like we've been close a couple times with Marv, and I still do very much believe in the talent. Now, there's also the idea that, okay, he really bulked up for this second season, and I don't think he looked very explosive. I wonder like what weight he's going to play at, if it might make sense for him to slim down a little bit to be a little bit more athletic and find that perfect balance within his body, find what the right playing weight for him is. The excuses are really starting to add up though, right? And that's why year 3 is so important for him. You can't get a third year of, well, this happened, that happened, exactly what I'm doing here for the last 5 minutes, right? It's just making excuses for Marvin Harrison Jr. There's no more excuses this year, especially if Jacoby's back. Like, it's freaking go time because the Cardinals need to know if they can count on him as that number one piece. They're going to have to make a contract decision on Michael Wilson. After Michael Wilson, as we talk about, there's really nobody else in the wide receiver room. Now, of course, you have Trey McBride and Jeremiah Love. There's other pieces here. But it's the biggest of seasons for Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm still buying in. I still believe in the prospect. But my goodness, it's got to happen this year, dude. Now, thank God, if you're a Cardinals fan or you're looking at this team, thank God Michael Wilson broke out in the way that he did. And for me, as a draft analyst, thank God that happened because this was one of my guys that's looking like a huge draft win personally for my draft takes that year. So I selfishly really like seeing Michael Wilson break through in the way that he did, being a 1,000-yard receiver. But he's really good, dude. I don't think he's going to ascend to the point where he is someone that you're comfortable with as your best wide receiver. He still is not the fastest guy. He's a little bit more limited as an athlete. It does certainly help that Trey McBride is here as your best overall weapon, and Jeremiah Love is going to get involved in there. But in terms of being a guy that at 215 pounds is very strong, has very quick feet, he can get off the line, he can snap off routes, he wins at the catch point. And he proved last year that he is phenomenal at using that size to attack the football, to be a trust throw wide receiver and come down with tough catches. He genuinely had one of the best contested catch win seasons in the PFF era of charting contested catch wins, which goes back to like 2015, I think. It's about 10 years of that data. And Michael Wilson, 22 of 34 for a 65% contested catch win rate. That's rare territory. Can he repeat that? That's going to be tough to do. It just is math, right? But even if that comes down to 58%, 55%, he's still going to be someone that pushes north of 850 yards and is a really, really good number 2 wide receiver. Is there too much more beyond, getting open in short areas and being a tough ball winner and being pretty solid after the catch because of his size and being a good run blocker? He is, to me, the definition of an awesome number 2 wide receiver. But that's why you want Marv to take that leap and be what you hope he can be and what you spent the number 4 pick on him in the draft, because then Michael Wilson fills in as just one of the best number 2 wide receivers in the league and doesn't have to be the number 1, right? That's just what you're really hoping for here. Now, I do want to talk about Trey McBride next before we come back to the rest of the wide receivers, because he is obviously so important in this pecking order, and he is the pecking order. It starts with Trey McBride. Led the team in targets last year, yards, touchdowns, you name it. This is very possibly the best receiving tight end in the NFL. And honestly, if you're ranking it with any sort of like merit or sure thing, it has to be Trey McBride, because George Kittle coming off the Achilles, Brock Bowers' incredible rookie season. And I don't think you can put Bowers over Trey McBride right now after a bit of a lost second year. Kelsey's not there anymore. Like, it is Trey McBride is the best tight end in the NFL right now at present. We'll see how Kittle can respond from the Achilles injury. But yeah, he's a superstar. They funnel their offense through him, and for good reason. And that's not going to change here with LaFleur coming in. If anything, they're going to center this offense around him even more because of all the 12 and 13 personnel we saw with the Rams. The fact that he can play your true inline position or either of those other two spots. He can be the wing player. He can be would that be the H-back or the Z, the true move tight end that Elijah Higgins is going to do a lot of the time. But McBride can do any of those roles and be phenomenal at it. He's got speed. He's got toughness after the catch. He wins, at the catch point. Talk about contested catch win rate. Trey McBride was awesome there as well, where he came down with 58% of his, 36 contested catch targets. Like, between McBride and Wilson, I don't think there was a team that was just winning tough catches more often than the Cardinals last year. But he's everything you want in a tight end, as far as being a mismatch problem and honestly someone that this team absolutely can view as their number one. So with that, it's like, if Marv even just settles in as a more consistent version of the good type of Marvin Harrison that we've seen when he's been on, he's still been a good wide receiver, right? Like, Marv did have 608 yards this year despite missing a bunch of games and playing through appendicitis, and he had almost 900 yards in his rookie season. It's not like he's been a bust, right? If you just get a more consistent version of him and Michael Wilson and then Trey McBride, that can still be one of the best groups of three in the league because Trey McBride is the number one. And then enter Jeremiah Love, who you're hoping can be something like a Jahmyr Gibbs, even to an extent Christian McCaffrey. Like, you're hoping he can really be one of the best receiving running backs in the league as well. And if you're drafting him number 3 in the draft, a good way to return some of that value is to give him 75 targets and really feature him, not just in the screen game, but with Love, they would line him up in the slot at Notre Dame at times, and he flashed legit route running and hands and ability to be more than just someone out of the backfield. But yeah, get him running angle routes, like be a mismatch problem on linebackers. If you can really tap into that, and some teams are better at doing it than others, depending on the play caller, with Trey McBride and Wilson and Harrison, this could be up there with the best groups of weapons in the league if everything goes right. And there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And that's exciting. That is really the focal point of excitement for this Cardinals team right now. So it's kind of, you're hoping that's your big 4 there. And then you get into the depth. So Kendrick Bourne as a wide receiver 3 for a team that's going to run a lot of 12 personnel. Sure, that makes total sense. He fits with Marv and Wilson. Bourne can play inside and out, so can Michael Wilson especially. But, Marv, if you really want to ask him to play the slot, he could do that too. But Bourne makes total sense, for what he is as a signing here. He was awesome for the first 6 weeks last year in San Francisco and then just kind of fell back off. But sure, yeah, plugging him in here, don't really have too much to say there. They draft Reggie Virgil, who also does make sense for what his skill set is. He was interesting because he ran a very slow 40 time, but I think he showed on tape and at the Senior Bowl that he can actually create vertical separation and get down the field. I don't know if there was something else going on with his 40 that led to him running like a bad 4.58. Again, the game speed, the tape shows a much different player. There's actually some wow moments from him in terms of like beating press and getting open down the sideline. So trusting the tape there in the 5th round, I kind of like that. And I definitely have been saying for years, the missing piece in this room is more of a field stretching piece. And Virgil as a flyer at that in the 5th round works for me. We'll see what he can do. I think there could be something there if you really create a cozy infrastructure, which is a big if, but that's part of the point of LaFleur is like, we have a guy that, okay, even if it's 14 targets in a year, they might be really valuable targets because he can get open down the field and take the top off the defense. So hopefully Virgil could be that. Xavier, there's really not much to say about the rest of the guys. After that, you're going to have the combination of Xavier Weaver, Jalen Brooks, Simi Fehoko, Tajon Palmer, Amir Smith-Marset, undrafted rookie Harrison Wallace. All these guys are going to compete for wide receiver 6, and I don't really have a big take on who does that or any of these guys breaking out. It kind of is what it is. If they even keep a 6th wide receiver, Devin Duvernay will make the team as their return guy. He showed some flashes early in his career as a slot, but he's kind of gotten away from contributing on offense and is more just pure special teamer at this stage in his career. But I do want to spend some more time on these other tight ends. I've talked a lot about how much 12 and 13 personnel we're going to see from this team, which means we're going to see a lot of Tip Raymond and honestly a lot of Elijah Higgins. And I love this trio. If you were to build the ideal 13 personnel trio, it would look a lot like this, where you have McBride, who's the perfect flex piece in the middle ground. Tip Raymond is a 270-pound beast of a blocker that if you throw him the ball, he can catch it and is a handful to bring down after the catch, but he's not a route runner. He's not a mismatch problem. He's not that type of tight end, but as an extension of your offensive line and your true inline guy, that's that role in an offense like this. And then Elijah Higgins, former wide receiver that is converted to tight end, he is that true move piece where he can give you enough as a blocker, but also with 4.5 something speed, be a mismatch problem. He's actually been pretty damn solid here. So as long as these 3 guys are healthy, if Raymond can get back healthy, that's going to be the identity of this offense, is those guys with Jeremiah Love and leaning into that whole idea of heavy personnel forcing the defense into a bind. Are we going to see like massive production from Tip Raymond and Elijah Higgins to the point where you want those guys like on your fantasy teams? Probably not. It's probably not going to be consistent enough to know when to start those guys on a week-to-week basis. But from a football perspective, that really plays in a league that we learned last year just how impactful 13 personnel can be. So to put that on top of a quadruple set of playmakers that are really exciting, look, if this team's going to surprise, and if we're going to look back on this and be like, wow, Mike LaFleur is him. Look at how he got these guys involved, how he maximized all these different guys, and look at how much talent is in that room and how annoying the Cardinals are to deal with. That's the path, is this screen right here, this group of guys. It's fun, man. I can't deny it. For a 31st team, this is a very fun room. And then, again, you got the running back depth there, too. If you wanted to go with like pony personnel with Jeremiah Love is more of like a move slot, like kind of what the Lions do with Jahmyr Gibbs. You could bring in James Conner or Tyler Algier and have them, protect the quarterback, be a check down target, where Jeremiah Love could actually do a lot of the Christian McCaffrey type of stuff, which LaFleur would have, no, there wouldn't have been intersection there, right? I think he went to the Jets right around the time when the Niners got McCaffrey, but obviously it's all tightly knit. It's not much to say that Mike LaFleur could look at what Kyle's been doing with Christian and implement that to this offense with Jeremiah Love, which I really hope that he leans into that, because if you're going to maximize drafting the running back at number 3, doing what teams have done with Christian McCaffrey and making him such a mismatch problem and a focal point of your passing game as well, is how you can maximize his value. So I am excited to see this room and how LaFleur taps into all these guys. And without even ranking these guys all at their upside, with Marv being more of a question mark, without having seen Jeremiah Love quite yet, with some questions about who Tip Raymond is right now, they still rank 8th to 11th for me at weapons. So very positive conversation. It's fun to have that kind of in the middle of this Cardinals deep dive before we get back on more of a negative note, which is unfortunately going to be the case here as we pivot to the offensive line. Now, while it's a negative note, I'll admit it looks a little bit better on paper than I kind of expected before I sat down to prepare for this video and look at this team. I think there's some hope here at the offensive line, and when you look at their offseason, I do think they got better at O-line. You could question if they could have done more here, but they did get better from being one of the worst O-lines in the league last year. They're saying goodbye to a lot of snaps. Evan Brown as an interior piece, Kelvin Beachum, who's been very solid here, but it looked like he kind of ran out of gas last year. Jonah Williams never worked out as a signing. Will Hernandez, just a lot of veterans leaving that did not play well last year. And a lot of additions. They draft Chase Basantis in the second round. They did sign Isaac Seumalo, a little bit older, but to a 3-year, $30 million contract. They bring in Elijah Wilkinson at right tackle from the Falcons last year. And then even some depth pieces, Matt Pryor and Oli Udoh. So it's very much a new look offensive line here in Arizona. 3 new starters, really building around their foundations of Paris Johnson at left tackle and Hjalti Froholt at center there. So it's not the worst offensive line in the league. They actually rank 26th to 27th for me. From a run blocking perspective, they're at least top 2/3 in the league, which bodes better for like Jeremiah Love. The pass blocking, I have some more questions there. But there's a foundation to work with here. Certainly some question marks. But maybe this could be a decent offensive line this year, and that's an optimistic outlook. There's definitely a chance, like we saw in Arizona last year, that this group could struggle, but you do have a franchise left tackle in Paris Johnson. That's going to be a great building block for any offensive line, and a young Paris Johnson that's been, honestly, for all the mistakes that this team has made, and yeah, it's easy to just say, well, you could have had Will Anderson, but to be honest, what they did in that draft, trading down for a first-round pick that you didn't think Houston was going to be as good as they were. You get their future one, you move down, and then they come back up to secure Paris Johnson. I just revisited my draft grades from that draft, so it's all very fresh in my mind, which I recommend you guys check out that video of me revisiting the 2023 draft if you haven't seen it yet. But this was honestly a slam dunk for the Cardinals, man. Paris Johnson has gotten better every year. He's already really, really good and has developmental upside still ahead of him. Like, that's not abnormal for a young player like Paris Johnson, who's still only 24 years old at offensive line, to come in as a solid player and then incrementally reach the point by year 4, year 5, by the time you're up for that extension. To be a kind of all-pro or Pro Bowl caliber left tackle, and I think Paris Johnson's someone that the Cardinals are going to lock up for a very long time here after what should be a really good season. He has not been impenetrable. There's been some moments with his anchor where it's like, I just want to see you get a little bit stronger. Again, he's like 24 years old. The average age of these linemen in the draft is like 23 and a half. So like Paris has been doing that in the league for 3 years, still getting better. I'm absolutely a believer in Paris Johnson as a foundational building block, blue chip piece for the Cardinals. So like that's a great starting point. And then I mentioned like they're kind of building around him and Hjalti Froholt at center, who's just emerged as a really reliable, quality starting center. He's not without his imperfections. He has his losses in pass pro. He can fall off some blocks in the run game, but he definitely solidified himself as a reliable piece and an experienced center at this point, and a very good wide zone run blocker. So like you've got those two pieces figured out, and then you introduce some questions that drag these rankings down a little bit, right? Like, okay, I like the Isaac Seumalo signing at guard. I'm not even so much calling that a question mark. It's just he will turn 33 years old this year. I think you watched him the 2 years prior to 2025, and he was, showing more signs of regression, lost more in pass pro. Rodgers is very pro O lineman in the sense that the ball gets out. He navigates things well. It's going to help a guy like Sayamalu have a big bounce back year at 33 years old. So like, he's coming off a really good year, earned himself a lot of money at his age. And I think he has a chance to be a pretty damn good player here, at least here in 2026. But again, like the age has to be noted with him. It's not guaranteed that you just get last year's version of Sayamalu. But I don't want to end his discourse on a negative note. Like, I like the signing. It needed to happen. And you're very happy he's there. And from left tackle to center, you shouldn't have to worry about it if those guys stay healthy. What really does drag this down is right guard and right tackle. You know, at right tackle, we're looking at Elijah Wilkinson, who had to start at right tackle for the Falcons last year when Caleb McGarry goes down prior to the season. And Wilkinson was everything you could have prayed he would have been when Caleb McGarry got hurt. And he was fine. He was a very solid backup type of player, but a backup, someone that signed for around $3 million a year here in Arizona for a reason. Like, you're going to find losses on his tape. He's not the tradesiest guy. He can get overwhelmed by power. He can lose to inside counters. Like, he's not the best people mover in the run game. He's been here in Arizona before. He's got guard tackle flexibility. They're signing him to be a tackle. He, to me, is best off as a swing tackle, which is what he was viewed as in Atlanta. Not someone I want to count on as a right tackle. And I do wonder if they have the phone lines open to see if maybe Taylor Decker could get brought in here, in which case I would really like that, man. If you had more of a proven commodity at tackle compared to Elijah Wilkinson, and you're really just looking at Chase Basantis at right guard as your big question mark, and then Wilkinson becomes a swingman there with guard tackle flexibility, I would actually freaking love that. And it might get the Cardinals closer to like 20th for overall offensive line, which is a pretty damn good step up. Please do that, Arizona. Like, I think that, you know, it just kind of depends on what your goals are, I guess. If you really just want to be tank commanders and go get Arch Manning, maybe don't do that. But if you're trying to build the best, you know, infrastructure for this team this year, that would be the path I'm going. But that's just not where we're at, right? Wilkinson is what he is at right tackle, and he's going to have some bad games. He's going to have some okay games. He might have a couple good games. That's kind of who he is at this stage. And then at right guard, Chase Basantis, I like the draft pick. I do. I thought he was worthy of a second-round pick. They take him very early, at the very top of the second round, but I'm never going to fault a team for investing in the offensive line, especially this team that hasn't been doing enough of that as of late. But I will say this on Chase Basantis. He is very young, and it's not like he didn't have his losses against college competition. I thought his tape was very inconsistent. You can see a guy that has everything to like in terms of traits and high-end reps and athletic ability and toughness. There's a lot to like in Chase Basantis. I just do think it's going to take a couple years. I think he needs to get stronger. He needs to get better at blitz recognition. He needs things with his technique to clean up. He stops his feet at times in pass protection. So, like, look, I like the pick, but I am expecting him to probably have his struggles in his rookie season. So it's really that right side of the line that drags this thing down a little bit from what's otherwise a very like solid to good center to left tackle group. And that makes sense why you end up about 26th for offensive line with your starting unit. As far as depth is concerned, you have a lot of names here. Like, okay, Oli Udoh has had to start a lot of games at tackle as a backup. He's not great in pass pro, but he's got experience. There's worse backup tackles in the league. Josh Fryer had to play for this team last year. Again, he has experience. The guy I'm most interested in here is Christian Jones, who I really thought was a value when they got him in the draft. Athletic guy, soccer background, was definitely a little more raw and had more of a developmental runway ahead of him. He missed last year. This is his third year, and you know, I've got my eyes on him. If he can get back healthy, there might be an opportunity midway through the year where this team's struggling and they say, well, we know what Wilkinson is. Let's see what Christian Jones can do. Maybe, you know, if he's really working at it and looks good in practice. He's the one tackle piece here where
I am fascinated. And I also do want to call out, I thought Chase Besantis had a chance to be a tackle at the next level. It's unconventional, and it's not like they're talking about it right now. They're going to start him at guard. Reminded me a little bit of Braden Smith, who was always viewed as a guard, and then it just turns out he could play tackle. Besantis can move. He's got decent length. He's about 6'5". I actually think he has the traits to be a tackle. So not saying it's going to happen, but I at least wanted to call it out. And then you have Isaiah Adams, who was a third-round pick a couple years ago. They're obviously replacing him here, as they should. He just has struggled too much. The development hasn't come fast enough for him. But now as a backup, Isaiah Adams is very reasonable. John Gaines had to play last year. And, it's a bunch of these guys, whether it's Fryer, Adams, Gaines, even Hayden Connor last year. They've had to play because this offensive line has been so bad. They've continued to be bad, but it's they at least have some experience, and as backups, I do think you could do worse than some of these guys that the Cardinals have. And they signed Matt Pryor, who's actually held up just fine as a backup guard. You've got a bunch of backup caliber players here, for whatever that's worth. And some of these guys, Christian Jones, Isaiah Adams, John Gaines, they spent a 6th-round pick on Jaden Williams this year, by the way. There's theoretical developmental upside in there with, those names right there. So, maybe some of these guys do break through and surprise. It's just good to have that many names that are at least fascinating, quote unquote. Not something you're counting on or depending on, but maybe, right? That's the best you can really hope for. Even Hayden Connor, maybe. But there is your offensive line. I just will reiterate the point that I ended up liking this unit a little bit more than I expected after I put my preparation for this deep dive together. It's still got a ways to go, but I can see a path where this, if Besantis really is a slam dunk, if Paris Johnson takes another leap, you could be talking about this as at least a top 18-ish offensive line, which paired with the weapons and the running back room, and that's only going to help those weapons and running backs reach their upside. You start to meld that together and maybe getting a QB next year, okay, we can really start to talk about the foundations for excitement in Arizona. And right now, what those foundations get the Cardinals to, as far as my rankings go, is the 25th offense in the NFL. Again, assuming Jacoby Brissett is their quarterback here, got a lot to work with. And ranking these units really at their floor as we come in, you've obviously got question marks and areas for improvement. I've got them as the 26th passing game in the NFL and the 21st run game in the league, really with potential, I think, to be maybe not top 10, but could this end up being the 16th best offense this year with Jacoby just doing his thing, hitting a lot of green lights with the weapons and the O-line and the running backs, with really surrounding that, the biggest thing that could help elevate that, I think, would be Mike LaFleur just being one of those coaches, right? Stepping in and being what, let's say, Kevin O'Connell has been for the Vikings, or what his brother has been for the Packers. If he is one of those guys, that isn't so far-fetched for this to be more of a top half offense in the league this year. If he's not, if it ends up being Carson Beck, if Besantis struggles and Marv just isn't who we hoped he would be, yeah, probably going to be maybe even a little bit lower than 25th. But yeah, it's one of the lower ranking offenses in the league with some questions as we head in. But let's go to the other side of the ball and talk about the defense that Nick Rallis is going to get to work with here this year. We'll start with the defensive line and look at their offseason changes, ask whether they got better, worse, or stayed the same. And honestly, there's some moving pieces, but I think this defensive line at the end of the day should be about the same, with one big wild card there with Walter Nolan in year 2 that we'll talk about. But as far as the losses go, it's Calais Campbell, who still played well at his age, and Dalvin Tomlinson, who was okay. Those guys played about half of their snaps last year. And then a bunch of additions, or a quote-unquote addition, with Walter Nolan, who dealt with really all of the injuries. It felt like last year was slow to get out there, then he was awesome, and then he got hurt again, what felt like or sounded like it was going to be, I think, a torn ACL that maybe was going to impact this year, but it was not, and he is hopefully going to be ready to go here. And that could be the biggest addition that this team makes this year, maybe outside of Jeremiah Love. But even that, even included that with what the difference a defensive lineman like Walter Nolan can make when he's looking like he looked in flashes last year, that could be a massive addition, as we'll continue to talk about here. But they also bring in Roy Lopez, bring him back, actually. I think he started in Arizona, but had a really good year as a run defender for Detroit last year. Solid signing there. Caleb Proctor, an athletic, developmental fourth-round pick out of Southeast Louisiana. And then, yeah, why not bring in Andrew Billings, who's good when he's healthy, which isn't very often. But a lot of moving pieces with the D-line. I broke that down as neutral, or maybe even hopefully upgraded. I think you can make an argument for as you start to think about the excitement for Walter Nolan. But then on the edge, they had other fish to fry and didn't hate this edge room, so really staying the same at edge this offseason. But yeah, let's break this group down. It's not a putrid defensive line. It's workable, and as we've hinted at, like a lot of upside with Walter Nolan, but right now they rank as my 26th overall defensive line. They rank 23rd to 28th for pass rush with a C+ grade there. And then even a little bit better for D-line run defense, B- there, 19th to 20th. So it's a workable defensive line up front for this defense. I want to start with Walter Nolan. We've already hinted at it, but this is the biggest, and we're spoiling ahead for my superlatives section on this Cardinals deep dive, but this is the biggest wild card for the Cardinals, even above Marvin Harrison Jr., because of the upside. When Walter Nolan got out there last year, it was jaw-dropping. It was, how did this guy fall into the teens? Good. He was wrecking games. He looked like, immediately, honestly, like the best version of what you were hoping for, a Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons-esque player at his best as he came out of college. This was one of the top recruits in his high school class. He ended up starting, what was it? Did he go from, was it Texas A&M to Ole Miss, I think was his path? And he is that disruptive, dude, and he's a two-way player. He's got a motor that never stops, which shows up like that, plus his traits alone helped him show up as a run defender last year. The ability for him to get off the ball and just rip through blocks and out-leverage defenders and out-leverage pass blockers and out-athlete pass blockers. He has legit pop and shock in his hands to bull rush you. The foundations are a really high floor player on the field. And then you see different pass rush moves from him. And it's like, dude, if you ever figure it out in terms of stemming moves together, that full pass rush plan, which there's no reason to think it can't for a young player, this could be one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. I really don't want to undersell his upside and what we saw when he was able to get out on the field in like 4.5 games last year. That's really all it was. And because it was so limited, no one's really talking about it, right? But as excited as I get about what he could be, it is all still just theoretical and needs to be proved. He needs to prove that he can stay on the field, and he needs to prove that he can continue to dominate when he does stay on the field. So there's a lot of reason to be excited here, but we got to see it. And I wanted to start there for that reason. But now I want to actually pivot back out to the edge where the rest of the good players on this defensive line are. And I would say, as far as the edge rushers are concerned, they have a very reasonable room. I'm not going to say the Cardinals get me super excited with these edge rushers, or that, you're going to get off the bus and you're afraid to face Josh Sweat, Zaven Collins, and Baron Browning. But when you've got a lot of aspects of your team that you're still working to improve, and you've got a lot of work to do, it's a very workable room. Like Josh Sweat in an ideal situation, like we saw in Philadelphia, would be more of a Robin type of player. He has to be their Batman, and anytime that's the case, you're almost by default going to be in the bottom like third of defensive lines. Like you want to find that Batman to build the rush around, and Sweat's not that, but he's one of the better Robins in the league. He's one of the best number 2 edge rushers in the league, so much so that I like when I'm doing draft comps and stuff, a lot of players get Josh Sweat comps where it's like he's got a good upside. I don't think he's ever going to be the best guy, but could he be Josh Sweat? Like I end up saying that a lot. And look, he had a really good year for Arizona last year. He's really athletic. He's great with his hands. He's got cross chops and swipes. He's got enough power in there. He's a good run defender. Really nice player, man. I don't have anything negative to say about Josh Sweat other than, like I said, he's ideally a 2 that they have to ask to be a 1. And it's just never the best starting point, like I said. But then opposite of that, you have between 2 different players, you have a very solid number 2 option between Zaven Collins and Baron Browning, who are very different players. But you can rotate those guys and put them in a position to succeed where you can live with that. I mean, Zaven Collins is, to his credit, one of the better run-defending edge rushers in the league. He leans into that assignment as a heavy-handed edge. He used to be a linebacker, and a good one, honestly, and moved to the edge because he's so big for a linebacker and he's strong. Like he can absolutely get off blocks. He's got stack peek shed technique, but he totally understands gap discipline and when to peel off blocks and be a playmaker. So like from an early down perspective, you talk about the D-line run defense being inside the top 20 for the Cardinals. He's a big part of that. As a rusher, he doesn't have the classic get off and power and pass rushing bag to be an impactful edge rusher, but he has developed at this. You know, he's been an edge rusher now for 2-3 years, and he's getting better at it. He's getting more crafty. You're seeing those pressure numbers come up. He's not useless as a rusher, kind of like we've seen from Andrew Van Ginkel over the years, where he's gotten a little bit better incrementally. And yeah, he's a reasonable kind of 2B. You want Josh Sweat to be your 2A, Zaven Collins to be your 2B. And I would say, yeah, Baron Browning ideally would be a true rotational kind of flamethrower type. He's got a lot of athleticism. He wins in flashes and with speed off the edge. And on blitzes, he's an athletic handful for offensive lines. He also moved from linebacker to the edge. And he's not the run defender that Collins is, but he's practical as a run defender. But I do think with Browning, we haven't quite seen the growth that we've seen from Collins. You know, Browning actually, when he first moved to the edge in Denver, he actually showed off like a spin move and had some pass rush moves. And it was like, man, with his traits, what if he really does just put things together? And what if he should have been on the edge this whole time? He's never really gotten any better. He's kind of just been inconsistent, and that's why they rotate him. That's why he's best off as a designated pass rusher, as someone that's not really a starter, but a useful player. Again, it's a very practical group. It's not bad by any sense of the imagination. It's just they don't have that alpha, that Batman. And if Walter Nolan can become that, then all of a sudden, Sweat fills into his rightful role, Collins fills into his, and Browning fills into his. That would be great if that could happen. So, and it's not impossible that does. So if you want to talk about another area of this Cardinals team to hopefully get excited for if you're a Cardinals fan, that would be it. And that's exactly why Walter Nolan is as big of a linchpin, is as important as he is for this Cardinals team, as we broke down there. And then we can shift back to the other starting defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman. Roy Lopez gets brought in here to do exactly what he's going to do for this team, and that is to two-gap and to be a steady run defender. He has come along very nicely. He is a better player than you will remember him as, Cardinals fans, and it's not like he was useless when he got on the field earlier in his career, but he's bounced around and has really physically evolved, mentally evolved. In Detroit last year, they had DJ Reader. They had their first-round pick in Tyleik Williams, and Roy Lopez was the best of the three from a just, stout run defense perspective. And he gets a half decent, 2-year, $11 million contract to come in here and do that for them. So solid signing, probably going to come off the field on pass rush downs for the most part. He had a couple moments compressing the pocket in Detroit where if it's earlier downs, I don't think he's entirely useless there, but very solid, reasonable signing. No one to get overly excited about, but I like adding him to the group here. And then it's probably going to be a big rotation of these 5 other names, assuming they keep LJ Collier. We'll see. But yeah, Andrew Billings, if he's healthy, is a very nice number 3 D tackle to have because he is one of these just injury-prone durability concerns, but he's a good two-way player if you can get him healthy and on the field. And that's why he's never been a starter, because teams have gotten smart about this. They're like, well, we can't give him 700 snaps a year. He's going to break. But if we give him 10 to 15 snaps a game and keep him fresh, he can play a nice role for you. So they needed that piece, as most teams could use that piece. So it's another solid signing if he can stay on the field. But even in a limited role, that's no guarantee. Dante Stills is a undersized guy that has stalled out. Was this team's best interior defensive lineman in 2023. But he's just kind of leveled out as a undersized athletic piece. He's good for twists and games and 3-4 odd fronts as a base 4-eye. So he'll probably eat up some snaps and keep doing what he's done. Darius Robinson, it just hasn't worked, right? He's been a bust. That's part of the Paris Johnson trade was look, I loved what they did, getting the Texans' future first-round pick, coming back up to get Paris Johnson. It's just pretty crazy that the second piece ended up being so late in the draft because the Texans were so much better than you thought they would be, and then you take Darius Robinson, that was never the most exciting pick to begin with. He's had a lot of injuries, but when he's played, it's been horrible. He to me feels like the definition of why tweeners can be risky. He's not good at edge. He's not good at interior. He has to go against NFL competition. It's what does he do well? I do think if this was more of a true 4-2 or 4-3 style defense where you could ask him to do what he was best at in college was setting a hard edge as a 5-tech. That's not this system, right? They have these other stand-up edge guys are your edge players. They've asked Darius Robinson to be more of an interior D lineman, and he's been miserable at it. So maybe Rollis can recognize that, and even if this team is a base 3-4 structure, you don't have to live in that, right? You can switch to a 4-3 odd type of look. You can still use these edge rushers, but then have Darius Robinson stick his hand in the dirt and be more of an edge. That's a starting point for him, and then maybe his confidence can tick up. He can rediscover that swim move, and maybe he could be someone that slides inside next to Walter Nolan as Roy Lopez comes off the field and get after the quarterback. It's year 3 for him. He's a first-round pick. I'm still going to keep my eyes on him, but anything you get from him is house money at this point. He's been a colossal bust, and I'm not optimistic there, but there's still a path, and I still think if you used him more correctly, there's a chance. And then they draft Caleb Proctor, who's a fascinating 4th-round pick, hyper athlete, elite first step coming out of Southeast Louisiana, who did have a very good game, by the way, against LSU as a pass rusher. As a run defender, he got obliterated. What's interesting to me about Proctor is not only is he an uber athletic small schools guy that lived up to, that passed the test when he got a chance against LSU. That's always a good indicator for someone that is fascinating. Because again, in his competition, it's hardly even worth watching his tape against who he's going against at Southeast Louisiana. It's just hardly translatable, especially with, offensive linemen at that level. It's just, I can't explain how bad they are at that level. So you want to see him translate against a team like LSU, even if their O-line's nothing special, but it's at least SEC competition. But anyway, what else is fascinating to me about Proctor is I love the awareness from him and his representation to be okay, at your level of comp, you could play 3-tech at 280 pounds and totally get away with it. That's not going to work at the NFL level. And he bulked up to 295. So what version of Caleb Proctor do we get? There's fascinating upside there. And there's definitely a role for him here with Roy Lopez coming off the field. There's so many opportunities to be won as a, pass rush specialist, interior guy. And he might not have to play a whole lot of run defense in year one, especially if like Billings can stay healthy. So it is actually, when you really look at the structure of this D-line, there's actually a great opportunity for him to come in and surprise and be a very early day 3 pick. He was like the second or third pick in the fourth round on day 3 of the draft. So definitely keeping an eye on him. The up arrow is on him. Like, he could absolutely be an impactful part of this, let's call it, transition season for Arizona. And then LJ Collier, like, I would just say he's going to scratch and claw for those opportunities we talked about as that pass rush specialist. Darius Robinson and Caleb Proctor need to earn those reps. And if they don't look good, I think LJ Collier can make this team where he's, bust of like Darius Robinson can look at LJ Collier someday and be like, that could be me someday. Like, former first round pick, complete bust and a tweener coming out of college. But 8 years into his career, he's scratching and clawing. He's had some decent moments as a pass rusher late in his career here. So if it's a worst case scenario if LJ Collier's playing, but he is a good guy to have there to kind of push Proctor and Robinson, because it's like, you got to at least get on the field over LJ Collier. You got to at least find a way to look better than him in practice. It's a good benchmark. So there's your interior D-line depth. And then we have some other edge depth that we didn't talk about. There's a lot of different players here. BJ Ojulari, I'm kind of done projecting much from. Another player we revisited in that 2023 draft class. And it's just like, dude, pass rushing traits are so important. Like, he just doesn't have the twitch. He doesn't have the power profile. He was such a technician at LSU, but he just hasn't been very efficient. He just can't overwhelm these NFL elite tackles enough. And the tricks and the gimmicks and the pass rush moves can only get you so far at this level. And he's been hurt. Can he still settle in as like a decent rotational piece? And has he even played, he's had enough moments where he can get some wins, especially if he goes against, lesser athletic, lesser physically gifted tackles. Like, he can play up a little bit more there. As a fourth edge guy, sure, BJ Ojulari is fine. But, for someone that was a top 40 pick or whatever he was, I'm not counting on much projection from him. Jordan Burch was one of my least favorite picks in that entire draft. I just didn't see it with him, and he had a couple flashes in the preseason last year, and Cardinals fans were tagging me like, you idiot, Jordan Burch is so good. And then the regular season happened, and he was one of the worst edge players in the league last year. He has the classic, like, size, length, speed combo that you look for, but he wasn't good at Oregon. He'll turn 25 years old this year in his second season, and he still doesn't really know what he's doing. So I'm just waiting to be wrong about Jordan Burch at this point, but I'm not betting on him personally. And I don't even know how much we see from him if these guys are all healthy. And that's probably it. Eku Leota is kind of a try-hard off the edge, but probably not keeping 6 there. So there is your defensive line. Kind of like other pockets of this team. There's some depth there. There's some names. There's some guys that will be fun to watch this year. Walter Nolan's the big one, though, right? Like, if he just stays healthy and breaks through and he's something like a Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, because I do think that's his upside, this could push closer to top 10 for defensive line. That's how big of a wild card Walter Nolan is. And we know how much a defensive line like that can change the course of an entire defense. Everything plays off of how you're winning up front. And Walter Nolan's going to be a huge part of how this team is able to win up front, especially because if Nolan is hurt, there's not much on the defensive line, right? Like, it's not only does Nolan set the ceiling, he sets the floor for this defensive line, especially in the interior, in so many different ways. But let's go to the linebackers here, and it's going to be a pretty short conversation. We had a long conversation about the Dolphins linebacker room. The Dolphins linebackers was, like the Cardinals D-line or wide receivers here, a point of fascination from a bad football team. Not so much the case with these Cardinals. I mean, you look at their offseason, not a whole lot to talk about. They say goodbye to Akeem Davis-Gaither, who was kind of whatever as an undersized linebacker for them last year. I think he's going to be starting for the Colts this year, but kind of whatever. I like bringing in Jack Gibbons, raises the floor a little bit there. They draft more of a special teamer in Carson Scherer in the 6th round, but not a whole lot to say in terms of offseason changes there. And then, I don't have a ton of commentary on this room. It's one of the worst linebacker rooms in the league, and I don't think it's controversial to say that. They rank 30th for me for overall linebackers, towards the bottom. Both run defense and coverage, very abysmal. C- grades across the board. You've got the veteran Mack Wilson, he's a reasonable, kind of adequate starter for me. Plays hard, he's strong, he's a good athlete out there. He's kind of week to week in coverage. The tackling consistency's been pretty week to week for him. He's a go-getter. He's got inconsistencies to his game, but he's turned into a nice player. Like, I don't hate Mack Wilson. It's just what you see is what you get there. And it's week to week inconsistency, but some splash plays on top of it. And then it seems they're going to be starting Cody Simon. This is another guy that I feel like they're overvaluing a little bit. I think Cody Simon's fine. I would love to be wrong about that if he turns into a quality starter. I thought he was a dime a dozen day 3 linebacker prospect that maybe in a worst case scenario, he ends up being kind of a Band-Aid starter for you. He sees the game the right way. He's got decent size, but there's just really no athletic upside there with him. It's not like he's got crazy, playmaking instincts or has given you a lot of reason to be overly excited about him. I think for a rookie, when they asked him to play, he looked about what you expected, where there was ups and downs in the run game. There wasn't much in coverage. And there were a lot of missed tackles in there because he does get out-athleted against NFL competition. So I think he's fine as a kind of, Band-Aid starter, replacement level player. That's kind of how I always projected him, and I didn't see much when he had to play there in that rookie season to change my opinion on that. He started 12 games for them last year. He could surprise, just as any young player technically could, but I don't see a whole lot of reason to believe that that's going to happen or to say that this, to me, is just a player that the Cardinals are kind of miscasting, I suppose, as like the LB, the linebacker of their future. I just don't really see him that way. In fact, I think Jack Gibbons, who they sign, is probably a best case scenario for a Cody Simon, and I think Jack Gibbons is a better player than Cody Simon, and that just kind of comes down to like, do you just want to play the young players and see what happens? Because there's a little bit more of an unknown factor there with Simon compared to Gibbons, who's been in the league for 4 or 5 years and has never really become more than he has. But Gibbons has shown like very high-end play as a run defender specifically. It's fluctuated a little bit because he isn't a great athlete either, and his margin for error is slim, just like Cody Simon's is. But yeah, Gibbons had some really good years as a run defender in Tennessee. He followed Vrabel over to New England and continued to be solid when he played. Not really a coverage defender, not really a blitzer. You know what you're getting there, but again, as depth, that's very good linebacker depth and probably a better player than Simon if they wanted to go with him. Honestly, the 2 most fascinating players in this room are the backups, the athletic Owen Papo, who's gotten out there like very minimal snaps in his first 3 years here. They've had moments throughout the beginnings of his career where they've just wanted to get his athleticism out there and see what he can do. Had major missed tackle problems in 2024. But last year, this was the first year he didn't miss any tackles in 3 games of playing football. And he did manage a couple pass breakups in those 3 games, just as he did have 2 pass breakups in 2024. It's an undersized linebacker that ran a 4.39 that was always a year away from being a year away from being a year away. When he came out of Auburn, it was always going to be year 3 or year 4 for him. That's why he went in the 5th round. So he's fascinating for that reason. I'm not a huge believer in his game, but if he's really worked at his craft at a linebacker position that so often the Owen Papos of the world actually go on in their second contract, there's a very real world where Papo was never really used in Arizona, but some savvy team picks him up and he's actually ready to play finally at 25, 26 years old, but maybe it's this year in Arizona. I don't know. Probably not going to happen, right? But if it was ever going to happen for Owen Papo, who's undeniably extremely athletic, this might be the year. So I'll keep an eye on him if he gets on the field. And then Carson Scherer is kind of where Papo was coming out. Scherer started just 1 year at Iowa, and there really wasn't anything to write home about with him, but he put himself on the map with an incredible workout, and he played really good special teams at Iowa. So he was drafted to cover kicks, to try to block punts, and just be a special teams ace for this team. If anything clicks at linebacker, great. But I do think from a special teams perspective, that was a nice draft pick for where he was taken. But yeah, that's all I've got on these linebackers. My bet is that the starting linebackers of the 2028 Arizona Cardinals are not on this roster. Both of them, in my opinion. That's just how I view this room. And maybe Cardinals fans will hate hearing that. Maybe you agree with me. But let's go to this secondary, which is a fascinating room. As you look at their offseason, really not a lot to break down here. Cornerback, surprisingly to me, they didn't really address at all. No changes there. And then at safety, not a ton going on here either. They do say goodbye to a long-term starter, Jalen Thompson, but they have had a replacement plan in place for a long time, or at least multiple years, in Dadrian Taylor-Demerson. So it's a loss to lose Jalen Thompson, but they've been preparing for this. And they did bring in Andrew Wingard. So I said slightly downgraded at safety, but certainly not the biggest concern for this team, especially relatively speaking with some of the other concerns that they do have. But that doesn't mean that they're set at secondary, where I have them ranked 25th overall for the secondary, and they definitely get the wild card icon with this group. You have, question marks at all 5 spots, but upside at 4 out of 5, I will say. It's not all bad with this secondary, but there's a lot of different moving pieces and question marks here. Let's start at cornerback. Will Johnson, you have a lot of reason to be optimistic that he can be kind of a bona fide CB1. But there's stuff, right? Like there's the injury questions with him. Someone that most people expected to go in the top 10 to 15 picks of the draft, they get him at the end of the second round because of this big scare with his knees. And then in his rookie season, he misses about a third of his games. And it's unclear just how healthy he was down the stretch because he started really strong. And honestly, as the season went on, he was much more beatable. We didn't see unstoppable CB1 type of tape. This isn't quite like Walter Nolan, where at least when he was out there on the field, there was really no question on what you were seeing. With Will Johnson, it was much more up and down. Now, we got to see more of him, which is good, and I am very optimistic. If he can stay healthy, which is like a giant if, right? Like you were able to get him where you got him for a reason, and he ended up getting hurt. So I really do hope he can stay healthy because when he is out there, like I've said, I think he can be a bona fide number 1 corner. And if that happens this year, that's definitely going to help this team rank better than the 25th secondary in the league. Really at his best, great zone eyes, incredibly quick feet. One of these corners that is excellent at finding the football, high pointing the ball, disrupting passes, good ball skills. I think he's physical against the run. He loves to come downfield and hit and jump routes. There's so much to like from him, especially in a zone heavy defense like this. Maybe not the best overall long speed, but in a more off-zone style defense like this, there's a lot to like there. So it's a big year 2 for Will Johnson, mostly just to prove he can stay healthy, but there were some games down the stretch where you saw him be beatable. So the player on the field needs to prove that he's a stud as well. But I like him as CB1. Unfortunately, the rest of this is a mess, and really the reason this secondary ranks so low. Garrett Williams, really good football player. However, he tore his Achilles late last season and is heading into a contract year. Ultimate question mark here in terms of, number one, when does he play? And number two, is he the same guy when he does play? There's just no way to know. What I can tell you is who Garrett Williams is when he's healthy. And it is one of the more instinctive slot defenders in the league, one of the more versatile slot defenders in the league. He's not like a lot of these big thumping, like bonus run defender types, like a Cooper DeJean or a Derwin James or, a lot of those types. He's more corner than he is big safety. So you're going to trade some run defense for coverage, but that coverage is really nice, man. He's got range. He's got great ball skills. He's really good in this zone-heavy defense, moving all over the field, reading the quarterback's eyes. I love Garrett Williams when he's healthy, and he might be the best player in this secondary if he's healthy, but we don't know that he ever takes another snap for this team, man. Like, that's kind of where we're at. He's got a lot of boxes to check before he can get out there. Achilles injuries for defensive backs, it's really rough, man. Like, athleticism and quick twitch is so important at any defensive back spot. So counting on, like, I put him up there on the graphic, and you see the C grade for the secondary, and you see Garrett Williams there, and it's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. This is a better secondary than that. And I agree with you. But he very well might not be there. Like, that's kind of the reality of where we're at. And I also put him up there on the graphic because there's no clear next guy here. We know Garrett Williams is like 99% likelihood not going to be available to start the season. Like, probably going to start the season on the PUP list, and then we'll see what happens. It's a complete question mark, like, who the nickel defender is going to be for this team. It could be any combination of players. It could be a situation where Budda Baker is the nickel, and Andrew Wingard steps in at safety. We could see Star Thomas, who's also coming off of, I think, a torn ACL last year. I like Star Thomas. I even put the eye emojis on him because I'm curious to see if he gets this opportunity, if they like him. Because he showed some pretty good flashes in 2024 and then had opportunities to get a starting job last year and just got hurt. But yeah, he's scrappy. He's got good ball skills. I think he has potential to be sneaky there. Keaton Crawford had some decent moments down the stretch last year as a 7th round pick out of Nevada. He's got potential to either be a nickel or, again, like Budda could be the nickel. Budda has, like, going back to his origins, was a nickel corner. Like, I would say any combination of probably Star Thomas, Keaton Crawford, or Andrew Wingard are your best bets to be the quote-unquote starters until Garrett Williams can get back out there. But all complete question marks, right? Other than Wingard, who we kind of know who he is, but there's just not a lot of upside there with Wingard coming off a really down year last year in Jacksonville. So you can kind of start to see where this begins to become a bit of a mess. Now, I think we know who their locked and loaded, like, CB2 is going to be. Locked, maybe not loaded. I mean, Denzel Burke kind of surfaced as the most reliable piece for them in the sense of, like, you kind of knew what you were getting. He's very beatable. He's not a great athlete. He falls to the 5th round for a reason. He's just not the twitchiest, fastest, most physical guy. He actually really struggled to finish tackles and get involved as a run defender. I think Denzel Burke has a very nice floor as a backup cornerback in the NFL and might do that for an extended period of time. But he's in a position where he's kind of your highest floor cornerback right now, like even above Will Johnson because of the injury stuff. And that's a bad place to be. I think you're praying that like Max Melton can click because Melton has the upside. He's had some good games in the past. But our guest here, we're getting closer to that guest interview. We got a lot of good insight here from Johnny about, Max Melton kind of getting benched, not being on the good side of Jonathan Gannon. A lot of interesting stuff with him, and he doesn't defend the run. So I don't think either Burke or Melton really could play the slot for this team. Like, I guess I didn't mention this possibility, but maybe Will Johnson could play the slot, and you'd go with Melton and Burke as your outside corners. There are a lot of different combinations that you could go with until Garrett Williams hopefully gets back. None of them are really ideal. But yeah, I think Burke is locked as CB2 on the outside. And then you got some other names in there, like Kytrell Clark, kind of is what he is, undersized, off-zone corner who's had some moments, but he's going to be kind of vying for a roster spot. You got another injury question here in Sean Murphy-Bunting, where if he could get back to his prime this year, that'd be phenomenal. I don't think anybody's really betting on that. When Murphy-Bunting has been bad for a couple years here, he got hurt, I think, in a non-football injury, and I think he's probably a long shot to make this team. Elijah Jones had character red flags coming out and has basically been nowhere to be found on this Cardinals team. He's got physical upside. I would love it if he kind of settled in and showed something. But, I mean, really, you got Sar Thomas coming off the ACL, Murphy-Bunting and Elijah Jones and everybody else. It's maybe make the team. So the cornerback room is in flux, to put it nicely. I would say this is a hurricane of randomness and unpredictability, and that's where this cornerback room has been for multiple years, where it feels like on a week-to-week basis we hardly know who's starting at cornerback for the Cardinals. I don't know that really changes this year. Hopefully it does. God, it would feel good to just come out of this season on a prayer, and it's at least Will Johnson and Garrett Williams got healthy, stayed healthy, and finished strong, and you give Garrett Williams an extension. At least you're looking at that okay, we at least know we just need one more corner, right? Or something like that. That might be a successful outcome for this secondary. And even that is hard to count on with all the medical questions here. But the safety room is a little bit more clear cut. Budda Baker turns 31 this year. Definitely looked like he was slowing down. Budda's always been, and I have to be kind of sensitive with this because he's a fan favorite, and I love Budda Baker. If you could just have 5 Budda Bakers in your secondary, you might be, I don't want to say the best defense in the league, but you would probably be the most annoying defense in the league because this dude plays with his hair on fire. He flies to the ball. He's super competitive. He's a great dude. But he has always been a little bit overrated as a coverage defender. He just never really finds his way to the ball. And last year we saw him getting attacked in coverage much more. So it could have just been a case of train wreck season, had some bad games, and gave up more in coverage than we're used to seeing with Budda. It could also be time's ticking, man. He's on the wrong side of 30 now and regressing, which would definitely not be great, but it's going to happen at some point. So he actually gets the yellow arrow for me and is a bit of a wild card in the sense of okay, what we saw last year, was it a random bad season on a bad team, or are you physically regressing? Probably physical regression, but regression isn't always linear. I like to point that out, where we could actually see a bounce back year for Budda Baker. And then you have Dadrian Taylor-Demerson, who I'm excited about. I think he's probably, at least in terms of clarity and not having injury concerns and just seamless transition with him in the same system. And he did miss a couple games last year, but I don't think there's injury concerns with him necessarily like these other guys. But he's looked good, like as the developing third safety here, a ton of speed, instincts. He is cut from the same cloth that Jalen Thompson was and Budda Baker is. Like, I think when they drafted him, I was like, his range of outcomes is probably somewhere around Jalen Thompson to Budda Baker. Like, saying someone has Budda Baker upside is pretty damn high praise for a mid-round draft pick, but it was so clear. It was like, he's that type. Like, this dude plays with that same energy. He has similar speed coming downhill to like Jalen Thompson. And he certainly has been very solid to good in a kind of multitude of different roles. And I think, especially with the defense staying the same coordinator, there's a lot of reason to have hope that Dadrian Taylor-Demerson will at least be something like what Jalen Thompson was for them. And that's great. That's a good number 2 safety, like full stop. Then, yeah, the rest of the safety depth. Mentioned Andrew Wingard, veteran signing. They needed some more, quote unquote, proven depth. He had a bad year in coverage for Jacksonville last year and saw a diminished role, but he does love to come downhill. You could play him as a box safety. You could play him as a third safety. There's usefulness for Andrew Wingard as a Band-Aid. Ideally, Keaton Crawford can kind of edge him out. I mean, Crawford had a lot of traits coming out of Nevada and played, he showed some good flashes, I think, late last season. You're not counting on too much from Crawford. It's probably just like play special teams and be a decent backup would be like a great outcome for a 7th round pick. But there's upside, I think, in this player, just being an athletic small school guy that fell through the cracks a little bit. But there's a chance, call it 10% chance, that he's your long-term Budda Baker replacement, just as Taylor-Demerson was your long-term, safety replacement there too. Crawford also kind of in that same mold of loves to hit and he's fast and there's stuff to like there. So I'm interested in him. And then you got kind of undrafted types scrapping beyond that with Joey Blunt and Wydett Williams. Yeah, this secondary is the definition of a wild card. There's actual upside here. There is. If guys can get and stay healthy, if Budda has a bounce back year. I'm not the biggest Max Melton fan. There's technical upside there. But I think a best case scenario is you walk out of this season with 4 out of 5 pieces that you feel really good about, and this feels like a top half of the league secondary. Worst case is nobody stays healthy, Budda continues to regress, and this secondary sucks butt, like that is absolutely on the table for this unit. It's a hurricane of possibilities with this secondary, which is probably more terrifying than exciting, I would say. But you're telling me there's a chance, right? All right, so this did come out as the lowest ranked defense for me as we summarize this side of the ball. Clearly, there's upside. There's undeniable upside here. They came out as my 31st pass defense, 29th run defense, but you need to start hitting some green lights because you keep stalling out at red lights with this defense, with injuries and guys that you've invested in not working out, whether it's Darius Robinson, Max Melton. It looks like they've found some hits in Will Johnson and Walter Nolan from last year's draft, but there's medical concerns there, right? So you gotta get better injury luck. You gotta find a way to get these guys healthy. And then, we can start to have some more fun conversations about this defense. But this is kind of like the Rogue One quote of like, rebellions are built on hope. This defense is built on hope right now, not built on evidence that this can work. So it'll be a fun unit to see how things progress this year. But yeah, ranked pretty low for me. But let's talk some special teams before we start to get to the sort of team summary portion of this video, and then get to that interview with Johnny, which again, you're not going to want to miss. It was very insightful. But yeah, with special teams, they do say goodbye to a couple of punters. They went through 3 punters last year, but they are going to be retaining Blake Gillikin. And then they're swapping out returners, and I think they made a slight upgrade there. Greg Dortch was pretty good at returning, but Devin Duvernay, former Pro Bowler, very good returner. And then where it at least stands out to me, I want to do a better job of highlighting some of the true specialists as well. Carson Scherer was drafted as a special teams ace, and I think in terms of covering kicks, it's a solid addition. So I do think their special teams is at least like slightly improved with a couple of these additions here with Duvernay and Scherer. But they did come out as the 24th special teams for me. Not horrible. I think ideally you just don't want to be in the bottom 3 or 4. Special teams is so hard to predict. That's actually why it gets such a small percentage of my final calculations for these teams. Not that special teams isn't important. It's just like, it's fun to look at how things project and rank these things, but it's definitely a bit of a crapshoot in that sense. But yeah, I've got my formula here where we plug all this stuff in. We use the PFF and DVOA team grades to get some more objective metrics, where they were 18th per PFF last year, 30th per DVOA last year. But their specialists do point them in the right direction there, ranking 16th at kicker with Chad Ryland. Blake Gillikin's okay. Came out 18th. Taking a look at his 2-year moving average as a punter after missing time last year. And then again, a little bit of an upgrade at returner. You rank top 13 at returner with Devin Duvernay, he's still been very good the last 2 years. He hasn't quite been at that Pro Bowl level that he was back in Baltimore in I think 2020, maybe even 2022 was his Pro Bowl year. Probably could have looked that up, but it was back in Baltimore. He's been, Jacksonville, Chicago the last couple of years. So there's your special teams. It's more of something that I like to display to you guys how the team came out, as opposed to like diving deep into this thing, which probably makes for bad podcasting for the audio listeners. You're probably like, okay, I can't see anything. That's great. Well, go watch on YouTube, my friends. Spent a lot of time on these graphics. I'd appreciate if you checked them out, but I can't complain. If you're listening to audio, I love you guys either way. But yeah, there is your Cardinals team splits. Again, ranking 31st overall for our preseason power rankings. A little bit better on offense than on defense. 25th on offense, 32nd on defense, 24th on special teams. And I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of pushback there with the Cardinals. A lot of people were like, they're either going to be 32 or 31. So as far as controversial rankings go, I don't think this one's going to be much of a surprise. But as we review their strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors, there are fascinating aspects of this team. I think when you talk about weaponry and running back, legitimate strengths for the Cardinals. If you can start to put a better infrastructure with play calling and quarterback play and offensive line, you can really start to become a bit of a problem, especially if they hit some of these green lights. You see like Marvin Harrison Jr. shows up as a wild card there. If he's just healthy and becomes the AJ Green comp that we all put on him, you put that into this group of weapons, it's like, holy crap, we're cooking with gas, lightning here, especially with Jeremiah Love in here now. So that's good. That's a great piece to be excited about. But as you look at the weaknesses, you can see why this team ranks 31st. Quarterback. Offensive line's a relative weakness. It's borderline, but there's still enough questions there on the right side that I put that as a weakness. D-line as well, as we rank them right now, 26th relative to the rest of the league. That is a weakness. Of course, though, you look at the wild cards category there, and Walter Nolan is at the top of the list there. Like, he can single-handedly dig the D-line. That's already kind of on the fringe of being a true weakness for this defense. It's an okay unit at the end of the day. But yeah, Walter Nolan, obvious wild card there that could dig the D-line out from being a weakness. Linebackers, not a fan of that room. Secondary is currently a weakness, but a huge question mark that could dig themselves out from being in that weaknesses category. And then another area that you're hoping that they can kind of dig themselves out of being a weakness is just the overall coach and culture. It's a very young, unproven staff, both from a scheming and play calling perspective, but also like this culture needs to be fixed. This has been one of the losing cultures in the league for the last couple of years. Talk about teams like coming together, earning the benefit of the doubt, playing complementary team football. This team has to learn how to do that. And that's absolutely an area as well that shows up in that middle category with the young coaching staff that you're hoping can kind of drag coaching, secondary, D-line out of the weaknesses category. And then it's a much more manageable offseason heading into 2027 where maybe it's like just need a couple more pieces on the offensive line, quarterback, linebackers, maybe a CB2. Like we can definitely start to get there, but just so much work to do with this team as we've discussed. But let's take a look at their schedule and what my win total expectations are for this team. It's not an easy schedule. Their own division is rough. They have to play the AFC West, and it's not like they got the week 1 or week 2 Chiefs. Like they're going to get the Chiefs with fully healthy Mahomes. It's not like they got the Raiders early either when they're going to be figuring some stuff out early, but by the end of the year, the Raiders might be clicking a little bit more. So that didn't bode well for them. Week 14 bye can be kind of tough for a team that's expected to lose a lot of games early. I would love to see this team get like a week 5 or 6 bye week to kind of get a reset there, but they could be going through it by then. And then they do have the NFC South, which is pretty good. Like, okay, that's fair enough. But yeah, their own division is gauntlet this year. It really is. So it's a tough schedule for the Cardinals. For me, the math had them coming out at about 4.5 wins, which is right where the Vegas over-under is. So on the money there, they are dead last for division odds, Super Bowl odds, tied for last, like kind of par for the course there in terms of where this team ranks with the expectations that they have. But the new part of this video is the final stamp of my actual prediction. I talked about this in the Dolphins deep dive, but I wanted to add this year because there's always a lot of people coming at me like, oh, you were super low on this team. Like you ranked them 27th and they finished better than that. But if you actually look at my preseason predictions, you would see that I actually was predicting that they would exceed my ranking of them. This is kind of the reminder that and maybe not in this case because I'm not predicting that the Cardinals do particularly well, but I put this in as a reminder that this is not a predictive series. This is a week 1 power ranking series, ranking all these teams at their floor as we head into the season with a lot of added context on top of that. And that's what this little section is here for, the My Opinion section. So for me, the Cardinals have a very low floor. I think with all the injury concerns and the added factor that isn't even a part of the total calculations that I use for all these different ratings, because I have Jacoby Brissett in there with that 73 rating or whatever for the quarterback room for this team, which is obviously very important. If Jacoby doesn't play for this team, that's a part of their floor. It really is. I think if Carson Beck starts 17 games for this team, I think they could be a 2-win team. I really do. They have enough playmakers and stuff that they might luck into a couple wins in all likelihood, but I had a 2-win floor for this team, which is going to be, I think that's even lower than I had on Miami because of the potential of Jacoby, tapping out. And again, in which case you will see the adjustment of the Cardinals. I haven't plugged it in to all the math and everything, but I would imagine they will drop to 32 if we're putting Carson Beck in there as the starting quarterback. But I do think their ceiling is interesting because there were so many injuries last year. There's so much explosiveness on this team in certain pockets. Some players that they've drafted in recent years, Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, Marvin Harrison Jr., that I'm really excited about if things can come together. I think they could even surprise as an 8-win team. If LaFleur is really good, it's not likely, but there's upside baked into this team. There's players to get really excited about. My actual prediction though, 3 wins. That's what I see. I think this team goes through it in a tough start to their schedule where you've got, look at those first 11 games, dude. Those are all pretty much playoff teams from last year. other than the Giants and a couple teams that you're expecting bounce back years from, teams like Dallas and Kansas City, Detroit, right? Like, that's brutal. And then you're probably talking about Carson Beck steps in, and I don't think they win a lot of games with Carson Beck, as I've predicted. So I've got them winning 3 games, either with Jacoby having some, Jacoby's kind of can get hot and have some good moments. Like, maybe you beat the Giants or Detroit at home, or, sneak a win or 2 in there early. And then the final month of the year after the bye week. Okay, I know I said I'm not a huge Carson Beck guy, but that is the easy part of your schedule. You've got home games against the Jets and the Raiders, who are probably going to be going through some things as well there. So I'm predicting them to win three wins at some point throughout this season. But they're my 31st ranked team for a reason. Okay, my final section here before we bring in Johnny for the interview is a new section for this season. The team superlatives for the Arizona Cardinals. So team MVP, and I do non-quarterback here, had a couple comments about that, like, why wouldn't you pick the quarterback? And it's like, well, it would be the QB for pretty much every team. Maybe not these first few where the quarterbacks aren't that great, but I didn't want to get to the 20th spot in these power rankings and like, okay, every single team's MVP is the quarterback. Like that, it just doesn't make for good content. So the non-quarterback MVP is going to be Trey McBride for me on the Arizona Cardinals. He's the best player on this team. He's especially with what I'm expecting with 13 personnel this year. I absolutely think we continue to be excited about Trey McBride and maybe even walk out of this season like, yep, that's definitely tight end 1. Like, you're already kind of saying that, but maybe he really breaks through. Maybe he even ends up a purple-coated elite graded player for me by the end of the year, which I don't do for a lot of guys that viewers of this series have seen. Biggest wild card, I hinted at this earlier and really broke it down, but Walter Nolan, I said it earlier, sets the floor and sets the ceiling of this defense. Everything, hard to say everything, but so much hinges on what he can be this year. One of the bigger wild cards in the league, non-quarterback, honestly. Breakout offense, I did say Marvin Harrison. I'm a believer. I'm gonna stake my claim that Marvin Harrison, is closer to what we were hoping he would be, especially if they can get Jacoby back. If Jacoby's not back, I guess I'd probably change this to like Paris Johnson becomes like a Pro Bowler, like maybe, but if Jacoby's here, I think we get the Marv we want to see. Breakout defense, I am going to bet on Walter Nolan. I am a believer. Health is big with him, but I am a believer in Walter Nolan being a breakout defensive stud for them. I did think about Jack Rabbit at safety for them. Just a little shout out there. Best rookie, Jeremiah Love. No analysis needed on that one. That one's pretty obvious, especially considering I'm a little bit lower on Chase Besantis and his immediate impact. I think he's more of a developmental guy that could struggle a little bit earlier. And then fantasy MVP, I want to actually focus on, instead of like, this is going to be the most productive player. And I think I did that picking Devon Achane for the Dolphins. I actually want this to be more of a like something you can apply to your fantasy football analysis and be like the guy that kind of exceeds his fantasy draft position. Like, okay, great. Yeah, Devon Achane's going to be awesome. But from a fantasy MVP, like, those are your league winner types. That's more of where I want to start focusing with this award. And I would have gone with Kevin Coleman Jr. For the Dolphins if I went with that approach. But moving forward, that's what I'm going to focus on here. And I'm actually going to put Marvin Harrison Jr. I think people are selling his stock a little bit. I don't know exactly what his ADP is, but I would imagine he's probably starting to slip into the 6th or 7th round. And I want to believe, man. I do, especially if Jacoby's here. They're going to pass the ball a lot. He's going to give them chances. I think he's going to be healthy and remind us of how special of a prospect he was. I really hope we get to see that this year from Marv, because it would be so disappointing if that dude just wasn't a great NFL player, because as a prospect, special stuff. But that's going to do it from my end of things. We are now going to bring on our guest from the PHNX podcast, Johnny Venerable. Do not go anywhere. You're going to learn a lot more here from Johnny in just a second.
I am very happy to welcome into the Cardinals Deep Dive, first time here, Johnny Venerable of the PHNX Cardinals Podcast. I'm sure a lot of you Cardinals fans are already fans of the show, but obviously go check it out if you're not already. Johnny, thank you for taking the time to come on. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's kind of the calm before the storm here over the course of the summer. We're excited about it.
Yeah, although Jacoby Brissett is causing a little bit of a storm in Cardinals Nation, so I've been told. So very interesting timing with this video, and we get to kind of get a little bit of the scoop on what's going on there. Maybe if people are watching this a month from now, everything will be sorted out. But I do want to get your kind of scoop on, just your spin on what's going on with Jacoby, and do you think he's going to play for the Cardinals this year?
It's a great question, and it's one that I think has evolved over the course of the offseason. Marcus, if you would ask me in January, like the odds that Jacoby Brissett was going to start for this team, I would have said 0%, hard zero. Jonathan Gann was fired. Drew Petzing is in Detroit now. Like that was their guy for the second half of that season, and he was signed to be a backup, and he did a great job filling in for Kyler Murray. And there was a falling out between Murray and the organization that's been well documented now. And Brissett is a professional and did what was asked of him. I would say like above and beyond. But under no circumstances does that mean, okay, well, that's our contingency plan when we cut Kyler Murray. And it wasn't. So a little inside baseball is like, they didn't inform Jacoby of anything. They hired Mike LaFleur. They liked having Jacoby in the building. They liked having him a part of their quarterback room. But their goal was to sign a starter in free agency. And we were at the Super Bowl and the Combine. The two names we consistently heard were Malik Willis and Jimmy Garoppolo. Like they were going to target both of those guys, and they did. And for whatever reason, they misjudged the Malik Willis market, and Miami ended up paying him about $22 million a year. The Cardinals could have paid that. They could have paid $35 million a year. Mm-hmm. And then they pivoted immediately to Jimmy Garoppolo. This all happened in a span of a few hours on that Monday to begin free agency. And, I think a lot of Cardinal fans would have been disappointed with Jimmy Garoppolo as opposed to Malik Willis, but at least it was an external alternative that didn't mirror what happened last year. And, I don't know exactly how the conversations went down with Jimmy G. There's been some concern that he had concern about his health and being protected in Arizona. And he's leaning toward retirement right now. He remains unsigned, but those talks fell apart. And so when that happened, the Cardinals panicked and they leaked it to a local outlet here, as well as I think it was Tom Pelissaro, that no, Jacoby Brissett's actually our quarterback one, and we're bringing in Gardner Minshew to be a part of the quarterback room. And so over a span of about 5 hours, it went from Malik to Jimmy G to Jacoby with Gardner Minshew. It was a unmitigated disaster, and it really set the tone for what has been a very difficult offseason for GM Monty Ossenford, who now holds kind of the scarlet letter of the 15-36 record left by he and Jonathan Gannon when they started in 2023. So long story short, to answer your question, Jacoby Brissett was unaware that he was going to be named the starter. If that was their plan, Marcus, all along, they would have brought him in the facility in February. You're our guy. Here's $10 more million. We're going to do this right in 20. No, they didn't do any of that because they didn't anticipate him starting. To Jacoby Brissett's credit, he saw what the Cardinals did and then said, well, I'm going to ask for more money now. He doesn't have an agent. He is holding out. I believe he is holding out for $15 to $20 million. I think he ends up showing up probably later this summer for a little bump. But again, the Cardinals know Jacoby Brissett, $15, $20 million, then to be benched about a month to 6 weeks into the season doesn't make a lot of sense. So the whole trajectory of this entire thing has been a mess and a nightmare for Cardinal fans.
Well, and I want to piggyback off of the idea of it maybe being a mess, depending on your opinions on the Carson Beck pick, because for me as a draft analyst, I saw that and I could not believe that they made Carson Beck the 65th pick in the draft. Maybe your opinion is different. I definitely want to get your opinion on kind of your thoughts and expectations for Beck. But my immediate reaction to that was this has to have something to do with this Jacoby situation, where like they see a guy that had all the starts, he's 24 years old, really no like physical upside, but he's maybe a little bit of leverage against Jacoby Brissett. Now that's not really what good, smart front offices do. You don't really make decisions for that reason, especially with a top 65 draft pick. But yeah, what was your kind of reaction to the Beck pick? What do you see in him, and how much do you think we get from him this year?
So they liked Ty Simpson a lot. Like they were minus 300 to take Ty Simpson. They had liked him back before they hired LaFleur in December, and I think that was their primary target. I know it was, and the Rams overdrafted him at 13. And this is like, if you're the Cardinals, like, what are you going to do? Take him at 3? Like they tried to trade down. I think there's an alternate reality, Marcus, where they trade down from 3 and take him at like 8, 9, 10.
11. Yeah.
Like I think there's a 30-40% chance that could have happened, but it didn't. And I think they made the right decision with Jeremiah Love for a couple different reasons I'm sure we're going to get into. So Ty Simpson's off the board, and then you hear like Pelissaro and people say like Carson Beck could be like a fringe first rounder. And I'm like, well, that's coming from one team, I think.
Yeah.
Here's my thought process on Beck. The Cardinals have had more draft picks than any team in the NFL since Ossenfort took over. They have had 27, 28 selections before this draft. So they're well over 30, 35 now. And they've got $150 million in cap space next year. I understand the Beck pick. I think the Steelers would have taken him in the 70s right after. In fact, I'm pretty confident in that. They had him for a top 30. And then the Steelers pivoted and took Drew Aller. But I think the Cardinals knew that the Steelers were going to take him. And the Cardinals had to leave this draft with a quarterback, a top 100 quarterback that they could sell to the owner, sell to the franchise. Here's what I'll say about him, is that if you go back about 18 months ago, he was the consensus first overall pick in what I think it was like the way too early mocks had.
Yeah, your way too early mocks. Yeah.
And then he had an up and down year at Georgia and blew out his elbow, and then went to Miami, not fully recovered, and led them to the national championship. He is almost fully healthy now with his elbow. Very similar to what happened with Brock Purdy, where his arm strength is coming back, which a lot of people criticize for, and rightfully so. It wasn't healthy last year. He's was a 6-year college football player with over 50 starts. Like I think when you look at like the LaFleur Shanahan makeup of a guy, Marcus, that like they can run the system, and he is an intellectual. People have told us that, very smart, can pick up the offense. I mean, it's like Cousins, Purdy-esque. Like that's what they're hoping for. Somebody that can come in and be that kind of player. So like he is never going to wow you with like his practice highlights, but can he just keep the train on the tracks? Good footwork, good mechanics, coachable, smart, has seen a ton of college football. The game hopefully won't feel too fast for him. I think he starts over 10 games this year. If it was me, I mean, like I would just play him week 1 and just see what happens. I would think that's in their best interest, because if it doesn't work out, then you have a top pick next year. But like pick 65, I mean, they had 4 third rounders 2 years ago. They've had so many picks. This is their first top 100 quarterback selected since Kyler Murray too. Sure. So it's hard to believe. So I think they thought they'd have more quarterback options when they intended to pivot off Kyler Murray. They shopped him at the trade deadline in 2025. And then, as you saw, the quarterback market just shriveled this offseason. It's probably the worst quarterback market recent history. And then you think about like Kyler's the best option and you're cutting him.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Like, there is no Sam Darnold, Mac Jones for you to pursue. So yeah, it's a perfect storm for their GM.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. All right, so let's pivot to the LaFleur hire. I just kind of want like your initial reaction. How excited were you, and how fired up do you think Cardinals fans are about this?
It's probably the best case scenario given the circumstances when you consider that you just had to fire Gannon, who around league circles like very well thought of, and when they hired him the first go around, like he thought he had the Houston Texan job twice. And then he took the Cardinal job and had immediate buy-in from media, fans. I got to know him. He's a great guy. And I think you can make an argument about his firing, whether it was prompted or not. I think the biggest kind of strike against it was, well, if you're going to fire him, you got to fire the GM too. And they didn't. So you're going into this process where You're not well thought of. There was 8 to 10 openings, and you just fired a popular coach who had Gannon has connections to damn near everybody, especially in the LaFleur,
Mm-hmm.
McVay tree. I mean, he's working for Mike's brother now, Matt LaFleur,
Yep.
and he had offers from multiple teams. That did not help the Cardinals. But it's, as you know, Marcus, it's 1 of 32. They were the last team to hire a coach. I think, and I'm not saying this disrespectfully to Mike, because I'm optimistic what he can do. Mike's as good as a hire they could have made this offseason, given the circumstances. He's been with McVay. He's been with Shanahan. He came to Arizona last year, I think, when McVay either had to leave for the birth of one of his kids, or he missed all practice, and he called the plays in Arizona, and it was the most efficient game against a Cardinal defense that was terrible. But they saw a lot of good things from him.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, as much as I loved Gannon and what he could have done, they needed an offensive coach, especially given what was going to happen post Kyler Murray. So all that to say, I like his staff. I think his staff is better than what, unfortunately, Gannon had put together. I think one of Gannon's biggest faults was not pivoting off of some people. Keeping Drew Petzing and letting Clayton Adams go to Dallas was a backbreaker. Clayton Adams is going to be a future head coach in this league. Whereas, look at LaFleur, he retains Nick Rallis, but he brings in, name escapes me, the Steelers' ex-defensive coordinator who's been there last couple of years as a senior consultant. I didn't love the Nathaniel Hackett hire initially, and then you warm to it when he's like, well, he's not going to be calling plays. He's been a head coach. He's been an OC. He's been with Matt. Matt was a big advocate for Mike hiring him. Matt's got Mike's back. And I think I'll never forget, the presser that day and the aura of Matt LaFleur at the Cardinals facility, right? That was a big deal. If you go and watch the presser and everything else, the Cardinals needed some of that. And it's almost like, John and Jim help each other when they don't play each other. Matt's going to look out for Mike, and the Cardinals need those kind of relationships if they want to get back to relevancy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very funny that you end up with the two former Jets play callers.
I know.
It's just always just bet on someone that didn't work in New York, and maybe it just works out somewhere else. So yeah. I'm definitely pulling for him. I'm a Packers fan, so there's a lot of connections, obviously, with everything going on. The staff.
Nate Hackett is the nicest guy, too.
Right?
And I think Cardinal fans were in a tizzy about that, me included. I'm couldn't snipe somebody from the Rams staff, but then you start looking at Gannon did not have anybody seasoned on his staff. He wanted to elevate younger guys, whereas it's clearly the intention of Mike is to bring in seasoned coaches to help him. So you lose 4 or 5 in a row. What does that look like? How do you handle that? And I think Nat Hackett's going to be able to help with that.
Yeah. All right, let's shift us talking about some of these players, some of the bigger questions for this team this year. We got to talk about Marvin Harrison. A lot of, honestly, just a lot of fantasy football discourse surrounding him, just what is going on, this blue chip wide receiver prospect. I'm still a believer in Marvin Harrison personally. I'm curious, how worried are you from last year? And if not so worried, why shouldn't others be worried and expect more from Marv?
I was convinced last year it was going to be a walking 1,300 yard season with double-digit touchdowns, and it didn't happen. And I think it's a combination of he missed some time last year, had a concussion, I think again, then he had the appendicitis. So a couple of freak things. But, he was in his own head early in the season. We all remember, I think it was the Seahawks game.
Yeah.
He had a couple bad drops early against San Francisco. I'm not close enough to the situation. I've met Marv a few times. He's very much an introvert, super nice guy, high character guy, everything you want, right? There's a reason they took him. I don't think they would ever publicly say we regret the pick. That was a no-brainer pick to everybody. But I think in hindsight, I saw something recently. I think it was Matt Walden or somebody brought up his pre-draft analysis of him, and this is kind of rang true. Is attacking the football has been a problem, right? When you look at the greats, his comp was AJ Green. Well, AJ Green, when the ball was in the air, he was coming down with it, right? Of course, Fitzgerald, the camp of receivers that he has been comped to, they had that ability to ensure that the ball was theirs in the air, and he's done a lot of body catching. And then there's also been rumblings about, and I'm not saying this is just things that we've heard, is just like how much of it, like a quote unquote, like dog is he,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of see like why that combination with he and Kyler wasn't ever great is because they're kind of wired the same way. Although,
Sure.
Can be, a rah guy. So it just, perfect storm. I don't think he was helped at all by offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. Drew Petzing, to me, I think the folks in Detroit, with all due respect, are in kind of for a rude awakening. I think he's very rigid in his ways. And I think Marv fell out of favor with Drew. You saw his dad call him out on Monday Night Football before the Dallas game. This is, I mean, like I'm confident in him. He's working his butt off, and I think if anybody benefits from Mike LaFleur being hired, it's Marv. But like, if it doesn't happen this year, it probably is not going to happen in Arizona. They would probably look to move him next offseason. The good news for them is like Trey's elite. Michael Wilson had like just over 50 yards receiving through 5 games, and he had 1,000 yards. Like,
Yeah.
Michael Wilson's 1,000-yard receiver in this league. So like, it, in hindsight, like, who would you have taken there? Like, Malik's got the knee injuries. Joe Alt's been banged up. Those were the 2 other guys that they were considering. I know Gannon really liked Joe Alt. He told us at the combine privately. I think we're going to go back and look at that top 10. And outside of the quarterbacks, Marcus, it's just, I think we overhyped it. It's just not as good as we thought. We did a redraft recently on our show, and it's like, I don't know who you would take. I think Marv is actually best positioned because of Malik's health and everything else. And, the other receivers have kind of been up and down. I think he's best positioned to be able to come out of that group as still the guy, which is crazy to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with like what on the field has disappointed with the ball skills and stuff. Like, yeah, that definitely needs to come along. Like, if you want to be more of a dog, just look at what Michael Wilson's doing and just do what he's doing in your body, Marvin Harrison. And then we're right back where we need to be. All right, let's talk about the Jeremiah Love pick. Were you surprised at all? You think it was the right pick? What are your thoughts on going with Love at number 3?
I'm probably going to be in the minority because usually like conventional wisdom would say like, don't do this. Right.
Yeah.
And like, I was surprised because so we were at the combine. He was the best player I saw while we were there. And I'm like, they need to take him, forget everything else. Is it true they need to take him for like interest and season tickets? Yeah, 100%. But it's also, as we got closer to the draft, it was like, look at the players that were drafted behind him. Like Francis Mauigoa has a bad back. He's going to play guard. Arvell Reese is playing off-ball linebacker for the Giants. It's like Carnell Tate, you're not taking him. So we're talking about players. It's not like the Saquon draft where after Saquon, it was like multiple Pro Bowl, Super Bowl champion quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Lamar. Like, that's not what this was. Had Dante Moore been there, they would have taken him. Had there been a Penei Sewell, Joe Alt level tackle, they would have taken him. It was the perfect storm. And I give them credit for making the selection because you look at like recent history, like if he doesn't get injured, like he's going to be a Pro Bowl player. He's too exceptional of a worker, a talent, an individual. I mean, he's been so impressive the brief times he's met with the media. I just thought, they open up free agency, and this kind of speaks to like what happens with this quarterback situation. They had an idea, it blew up in their face, they pivoted. They signed Tyler Algier the first day of free agency. So it's like free agency was a double whammy for Cards fans. They botched the quarterback situation, and then like day one, they put the Love dream to bed because they brought back James Conner and they signed Tyler Algier. And Cardinal fans were like, see you in 2027. And then I do think they got closer to the draft, and then they talked themselves into it because of this. I mean, it was a down year. You and I both know it was not a great draft. They tried to shop the pick to try to mirror what they did in 2023. I mean, you saw some of those trade-up packages were 60 cents on the dollar.
Right.
So I give them credit. I know people are worried about how much you're paying them. They have so much money available. They don't have enough good players to pay. If he's a 1 contract or extension, so 2 contract player, and is good for this team for 8 years, that for this franchise, it is 100% the right choice.
Yeah. I've warmed up to it quite a bit for all the reasons you just said. And I think once it's made, you start to kind of, in hindsight, have the same conversations they were probably having in the 3 months leading up to it. It's like, it's just, you kind of just go to bed easy with it.
I think
And
if you
it's
had passed on, if David Bailey had been there and you had passed on David Bailey, who I think is going to sleepwalk his way to like 12 sacks a year, then we can have that conversation, right? But
sure.
like we've done Arvell Reese with Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins.
Yeah.
Like we've done that. They can't do that again.
I know. Yeah, you keep saying perfect storm, and it's funny how all these things just keep merging together with things that the Cardinals can't really do to themselves.
Right.
All right. Another player that is very fascinating to me is Trey Benson. We don't need to spend too much time on him because he's RB4 at this point in that room. But yeah, I was just curious, like, do you still think he has potentially talk about a perfect storm? Like he had the opportunity when James Conner gets hurt and then he gets hurt. And now it's just like, okay, he's just irrelevant now. So could you see him getting traded? Do you think he still has potential, or are you kind of just like, there's not really much there?
I think he could get traded in camp for a late round pick. I remember, not to knock him, because I liked the pick a lot. I remember like his speed looked like super, super evident on film. So one cut and go guy. I think
reminded me of Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, he had like a sub
bit.
4.4 at the combine. And then like when we got to the first training camp set of practices and he was like going through the bags, he was like almost last in line and he just looked like a guy. And that I'm like, okay, so he's like biding his time and he had things to figure out. And like to his credit, he's always had a good like yards per carry, but like Amari DiMercato was ahead of him on the depth chart and James Conner was the alpha 2 years ago. You're right. Like, unfortunately, like this league is about taking advantage of your opportunities. James Conner goes down like almost immediately last year, and they're like, "You're our guy, Trey. We need you. That you're all we have outside of a DiMercato, Michael Carter, and Bam Knight." And then he immediately gets hurt, and it's just like that's it. Torn meniscus, which he's not healed from yet. He's still out of OTAs right now. Yeah, he's. I don't want to use the word toast, but like. I don't see them cutting James Conner. I think that they have too much respect for him. I think if somebody needed James Conner, if there's an injury, I think like we're going to do right by James. He'll go and be like the starter somewhere. Algiers going to play the role he played in Atlanta, which is hilarious because they told him he was going to be their guy. And now he's going to be one beat to Jeremiah Love, which he should.
Same thing happened to him in Atlanta.
Right. Yes.
Great rookie season, and then they just draft Bijan.
But at least he's getting paid now. I mean, they're paying him good money.
Yeah.
I like the only way I could see like Trey Benson sticking around is like, I mean, your second, third, fourth backs have to play special teams. Like James Conner's not going to play special teams, right? Like is Tyler Algier going to play? So like that part's weird. I could see a scenario where if they don't trade him, he could just be outright released. Like it's unfortunate just because it's a numbers game. They did this to themselves. But James Conner's a Ring of Honor guy. Like, I just don't think you can cut him for optics. I think that this is Jeremiah Love's team now. So,
yeah. Hey, I'd love my Packers with those connections. Just throw a 2029 seventh round pick for them.
That would be like
be a good fit.
That'd be the perfect solution. Is like, hey, we're going to trade you somewhere. Jacobs has had injury concerns. They want to get younger. X, Y, and Z. I mean, he's still like 24 years old. Like I could definitely see him having success. He probably needs a fresh start.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's transition to some defensive questions here. Walter Nolan is coming back from an injury.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing, it's kind of positive news. Is that accurate? Are they expecting him to be kind of ready to go early, or what are you thinking there?
So we initially thought it was an ACL, and then we got confirmation it wasn't, and then hit the team. Unfortunately, is like murky with news on injuries, and they don't like revealing things. But thankfully, his girlfriend is very lively on TikTok, and she said on TikTok it was a torn meniscus. So like, it's healed. He will be ready for training camp, and they desperately need him because like he is legit. He is their best defensive lineman. He was unblockable last year. If he plays 15 games this year, I think he will be Pro Bowl consideration, depending on how, I mean, Cardinals, who knows if they would get votes for it, but like, like that, he is not a miss. Like Darius Robinson the year before looks like a miss, just nice guy. huge, built, like a brick truck, just cannot disrupt at the line of scrimmage,
Yep.
can't get TFLs. Walter, like, look at Dallas last year on Monday Night Football.
Oh
Like
my God.
they couldn't block him. He's a hit. If he plays this year, that's a hit for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, 100%. And then the cornerback room is something that has really thrown my mind for a loop like the last 2-3 years. Just like that room, it's someone different every week. It feels like,
Yeah.
we liked what we saw from Will Johnson for sure. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Who else in that cornerback room, like, I guess gets you excited? Is there anybody that gets you excited? If it's not excitement, like what are we talking about in terms of starters for this year at least?
So Will, quickly, like I saw him 2 weekends ago or last weekend at a charity basketball game for Mac Wilson Sr., and he looks like he's in phenomenal shape. He's put on weight.
Yeah.
Christian Gonzalez was actually in that same celebrity basketball game, and they're guarding each other. And it's like, okay, he's not Christian Gonzalez, but he's getting there, right? Christian Gonzalez is an absolute freak.
Yeah.
And so
sorry to catch up. Wasn't Christian Gonzalez's dad like a professional basketball player or something like that? Yeah. So he's probably got some hoops.
He looks like he should be a safety, but he's got cornerback speed. Like you can tell why he's a problem for opposing offenses. I think so. For better or worse, Will's their number one, and he's got more confidence this year. He wasn't fully healthy. He said last year when the Cardinals drafted him, he's healthy now, and he had a good training camp, really good training camp with the team last year. But he fell off like the rest of the defense, and it snowballed from there. So he gets a clean slate. He goes back to his college number 2. And then it's just, I think on the surface level, like it should be Max Melton, who played a lot as a rookie, second-round pick out of Rutgers, freak athlete, showed some good things. He had a falling out with Nick Rallis last year where he was like benched, then played special teams, and then like the Cardinals offered their DC job, were pretty convinced to 2 guys, and they both said no, one of which I think was the Seahawks DB coach. And then they retained Nick Rallis. They basically held Nick Rallis hostage in the Cardinals organization for like 5 weeks after they fired Gannon. And then Max Melton posted on Instagram a very like upset meme or something because but they need to make up because they need him because he's a good player with high upside. They took a corner from Ohio State last year, Denzel Burke, who played a lot, who is a coach's dream, everything you want, but he's undersized. Can he be a competent starter? Those are the big 3. Their most seasoned player, Garrett Williams, last year ruptured his Achilles in December. I just don't think he's going to play this year. I think.
Oh man, I didn't know that. That's a huge bummer.
It's a huge loss. He was primed for an extension. I think probably what will end up happening is you sit him all year and then you give him a 1 to 2 year deal next spring. He's a really good player out of Syracuse.
He's awesome.
Yeah. So he's out. So you got Sean Murphy Bunting hanging around. They've got a couple of Keitrell Clark, Starling Thomas, but it's going to be Will Johnson, Denzel Burke, and Max Melton, I think, kind of ride or die.
All right.
A lot to prove there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Last question here is on Dadrian Taylor Demerson. Just curious, like, are you pretty comfortable with him stepping in? Have you liked what you've seen there? They make the, letting Jalen Thompson go. It felt like the second they drafted DTD, it was like similar style player, like just give it a year or two and that's going to be pretty seamless. Are you kind of still on that trajectory? You feeling pretty cozy there?
Yeah. I mean, he, as a rookie, was primed to take over sooner rather than later. And then last year, like a lot of their players, you just missed too much time because of injury. He just wasn't healthy. He like never practiced. He's a stocky guy. He's maybe 5'10", but he's built and he's a really good athlete. I mean, he had 2 picks last year, but like as a rookie, he played a lot down the stretch. I remember talking to Rallis at the combine, and they were going to use a lot of 3 safety sets with Buda and Jalen. And with all due respect to Buda, I mean, he's over 30 now. He's lost a step. He's more of a box safety. Like Taylor Demerson was basically going to play center field for them last year, and they didn't have him for the majority of the season. So they need him because they signed Andrew Wingard from the Jags, and he's kind of a third safety. So Demerson has to step up. I mean, it's like they're expecting a lot of things. This is what I'll say about the Cardinals defense. They were atrocious last year. The players basically went to Cancun in November. The season was over. and the offense couldn't run the ball, so the defense was constantly out there. They have a lot of young talent. I mean, it's like Taylor Demerson. They drafted Cody Simon last year. Sweat's probably one of their most seasoned players, and they got Walter Nolan. They took Jordan Birch last year. They got all these young players, top 100 players on defense. Like, it wouldn't shock if a couple of them just take a step forward. Like, the Cardinals defense won't be as bad as people think. But the problem is if they're all kind of average to middling, and then the losses start to pile up because of what's happening on the offensive side, we're just going to have the same kind of conclusions we did last year.
Sure. Yeah. All right, man. Well, that was a ton of fun. Very insightful. Thank you so much for coming on. Remind people where they can find your work and what you guys got going on.
Yeah, I'm just on Twitter at Johnny Venerable. And then, of course, we host number one Cardinal podcast at PHNX Cardinals. Myself, my co-host, Bo Brock. Follow us, PHNX_Cardinals. And, of course, subscribe to PHNX Sports on YouTube. We just crossed 50,000 subscribers. Been around for just 5 years. So we're fired up about what we've got going on at PHNX Sports. Cardinals need to give us something to be fired up about, though. So I think Bo and I, on average, about 5 wins per season. So we're still waiting for this team to break through.
Yeah, we're all pulling for you guys. We are.
Enjoy Jonathan Gannon too, Marcus. He's a great guy.
Yeah. I think he's going to do good. Thank you so much for the time, Johnny. So a huge thanks again to Johnny for adding to this Cardinals deep dive. That's been another great one. Thank you to all of you for watching. If you are still with us here into the late hours of this deep dive, probably pushing 2.5 hours here. So thank you again for enjoying this series. If you are still here and you have not hit that like button, please, on the way out, it really does help me. I really appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed as well. Should have our number 30 team here within the next 3-4 days, so you can look forward to that. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the ranking and the analysis here today, where you think I went right, where you think I went wrong. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.